My brother's fiancée leaned in at the party, whispering that people like me ruin the photos. She glared at my dress like it was a stain. She had no idea the access card to her office's executive suite was in my pocket, or that people like me sign the lease for the building where her family works. The real twist wasn't her insult. It was finding my signature on the checks that pay her bills. My name is Isla Lewis. I am 29 years old, and if you saw me walking down the street in my usual attire, you would likely mistake me for a project manager, or perhaps a tired architect, but certainly not the person who owns the pavement you are walking on. I have always preferred the background. The shadows are where the real work gets done, where the foundation is poured, and where the checks are signed. My brother, Ethan, is the opposite. He is the sun, bright and blinding, the kind of man who walks into a room and instantly pulls gravity toward him. I love him. I have always loved him, even when our parents made it clear that he was the investment and I was merely the overhead costs. That dynamic was the only reason I was standing in the doorway of a rooftop lounge in South End. Charlotte, feeling the humidity cling to my skin. It was his engagement party. The venue was spectacular, a glass-walled enclosure offering a panoramic view of the city skyline, where the banking towers pierced the violet sky like jagged teeth. The air smelled of expensive perfume, gin, and that specific, crisp scent of money being spent to prove a point. It was a crowd of corporate climbers, the kind of people who used buzzwords in casual conversation and checked their watches while you were speaking to them. I was late. Not fashionably late, but disastrously late. I had spent the last 6 hours in Raleigh at a construction site that had run into a critical zoning issue. I had been wearing a hard hat and steel-toed boots until exactly 2 hours ago. I had driven back to Charlotte doing 80 miles an hour. My nerves fried, and I had not had time to go home. I had changed in the bathroom of a gas station just off the highway, swapping my work gear for a simple navy cotton dress I kept in my trunk for emergencies. It was clean, but it was wrinkled. My hair, usually kept in a severe bun, was escaping in frizzy tendrils around my face, and I was fairly certain there was a smudge of drywall dust on my left elbow. When I stepped onto the terrace, the contrast between me and the guests was violent. The women were draped in silk and sequins, their faces contoured to perfection, holding champagne flutes like they were extensions of their fingers. The men were in tailored suits that cost more than my first car. The hum of conversation died down slightly as I entered, or maybe it just felt that way. I saw eyes dart toward me, then dart away, the way people look when they see something that does not belong. Isla, you made it. Ethan's voice broke the tension. He bounded over, looking dashing in a charcoal suit, his smile genuine. He hugged me, and for a second, I felt safe. He smelled like cedar and joy. I am so sorry I'm late, I said, pulling back. The site in Raleigh was a nightmare. I barely made it out. Don't worry about it, Ethan said, though I saw his eyes flick briefly to my wrinkled skirt. He didn't say anything mean, but the observation was there. I am just glad you are here. Madison is dying to see you. Come on. He led me through the crowd. I kept my head high, ignoring the whispers. I walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of someone used to navigating rebar and wet concrete, which looked ridiculous in a room full of people gliding on air. We found Madison near the bar. She was stunning. I had to give her that. She wore a cream-colored cocktail dress that looked like it had been spun from light, and her blonde hair was arranged in waves that probably took a professional 3 hours to perfect. She was laughing at something a man in a pinstripe suit said, her head thrown back, her neck long and elegant. Maddie, Ethan said, look who is here. Madison turned. Her smile was wide, bright, and rehearsed. It stayed on her face for exactly 1 second before her eyes dropped to my dress. The smile didn't disappear, but the warmth drained out of it instantly, leaving behind something cold and sharp. It was a look I knew well. It was the look a health inspector gives a dirty kitchen. Isla, she said, her voice an octave higher than natural. We were beginning to think you were not coming. Work ran late, I said, forcing a smile. You look beautiful. Madison, congratulations. Thank you, she said. She stepped closer, invading my personal space under the guise of a greeting. She smelled of vanilla and ambition. Ethan, honey, could you grab me another drink? The sparkling rosé. Of course, Ethan said, squeezing my shoulder before heading to the bar. The moment he was out of earshot, the air around us changed. The party noise seemed to fade into a dull roar. Madison didn't step back. She leaned in closer, her face inches from mine, maintaining that frozen, photo-ready smile so that to anyone watching, it looked like we were sharing a sisterly secret. You look like a disaster, she whispered. The words were soft, intimate, like she was telling me I had lipstick on my teeth. I blinked, taken aback by the directness. Excuse me? Look around you. Isla, she hissed, her voice dropping lower. This is a high-end event. My friends are here. My father's business partners are here. And you walk in looking like you just rolled out of a dumpster. I came straight from a job site, I said, keeping my voice steady, though my pulse began to thrum in my ears. I drove 2 hours to be here for you and Ethan. You should have driven home, she countered. Her eyes were hard, devoid of any empathy. People are staring, and not in a good way. She reached out and picked a piece of lint off my shoulder, flicking it away with a look of disgust. Then she leaned in again, her lips brushing my ear. Poor people ruin the photos, Isla. The sentence hung in the air between us, heavy and ugly. She pulled back, winking at me as if it were a joke, but her eyes remained dead serious. Just try to stay out of the background, okay? She added cheerfully, loud enough for a nearby couple to hear, masking the venom with fake concern. We want everything to be perfect. Before I could respond, a flash went off in my face. I turned to see Kayla, Madison's younger sister, holding her phone up. She was 22, worked in social media management, and had a phone glued to her hand at all times. She was giggling. Got it, Kayla said, tapping furiously on her screen. What are you doing? I asked, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. Just documenting the night, Kayla said, popping her gum. Don't worry, I used a filter. It helps. My phone vibrated in my clutch. I ignored it, but I knew what had just happened. I would check it later and see a story on her Instagram, a blurry shot of me looking disheveled next to the pristine Madison, with a caption like, "Someone didn't get the dress code memo," followed by a crying laughing emoji. It was petty. It was high school behavior. And it was happening at a party celebrating my brother's love. I took a deep breath. Do not make a scene, I told myself. This is Ethan's night. Do not be the difficult sister. I retreated toward the edge of the terrace. Near the railing, the view was breathtaking. From here, I could see the layout of the city, the grid of lights, the arteries of traffic. I knew this building well. I knew the load-bearing capacity of the roof we were standing on. I knew the HVAC system had been upgraded 6 months ago because I had signed the purchase order for the units, but I couldn't say that. To them, I was just Isla, the sister who scraped by. Well, if it isn't the prodigal daughter. I stiffened. I knew that booming, jovial voice. It was Frank Reed, Madison's father. He was a large man who took up a lot of space and assumed everyone wanted him to. He was walking over with his wife, Tracy, a woman who looked like she had been vacuum-sealed into her cocktail dress. They both worked at Brightwell Analytics Frank in facilities. Tracy in HR. They were mid-level managers who acted like executives. Hello, Frank? Hello, Tracy? I said politely. Frank looked me up and down, making no attempt to hide his amusement. Rough day at the office. Or are you still doing those, what do you call them, fix-it jobs? I work in property management, Frank, I said, the standard lie I used to simplify my life. It wasn't technically a lie, just a massive understatement. Right, Frank laughed, swirling his scotch, changing light bulbs and plunging toilets. Honest work, Isla, honest work. Someone has to do it, Tracy chimed in, her voice dripping with that particular southern sweetness that masks condescension. We were just saying how proud we are of Ethan. He has such a bright future at the company, It is so nice he found someone like Madison who can really elevate him. You know how important image is in this town." She paused, letting her eyes drift over my wrinkled dress again. "It must be hard for you, dear, watching him soar while you are still figuring things out." "I am doing just fine, Tracy," I said, my voice tight. "Oh, I am sure you are." She patted my arm. "And hey, if you ever need something more stable, let me know. Brightwell is always looking for receptionists. You have a nice speaking voice. We could clean you up." Frank guffawed as if she had cracked the wittiest joke of the century. "Receptionist. That is a good one, Tracy. But hey, discounts on the vending machine. Right, Isla?" They laughed together, a synchronized sound of self-satisfaction. I felt the heat rising up my neck. It wasn't just the insults. It was the confidence behind them. They felt entirely comfortable belittling me because, in their world, your value was determined by your job title and your outfit. They saw a woman in a wrinkled dress and assumed I was beneath them. They assumed my silence was submission. I looked across the room at Ethan. He was with Madison again, his arm around her waist, laughing at something she whispered. He looked happy. He looked oblivious. If I caused a scene now, if I told Frank that his stable job was dependent on a payroll budget I approved, if I told Madison that her perfect venue was one of 30 assets in my commercial portfolio, it would shatter the night. Ethan would be humiliated. The engagement would start with a war. So I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I forced my hands to unclench. "I will keep that in mind," I said to Tracy. "Thank you for the offer." "Think nothing of it," she said, dismissing me as she turned to wave at someone more important. "Just try to have a good time, dear, and maybe grab a napkin for that dust on your arm." They walked away, leaving me standing alone by the railing. The wind whipped at my messy hair. I felt small, for all my success, for all the late nights analyzing spreadsheets and negotiating with contractors, for all the millions of dollars in assets I controlled through my holding company. In this moment, I was exactly who they said I was, the poor relation. The stain on the photo. I pulled out my phone. I needed a distraction. I opened my email, scrolling through the endless stream of notifications. Urgent, high priority, signature required. One email caught my eye. It was from my chief operating officer, Nina. The subject line was simply, "Monday morning audit." I stared at the screen. The anger that had been simmering in my gut began to cool, hardening into something dense and heavy like lead. They wanted to talk about stability. They wanted to talk about image. They wanted to talk about who belonged where. I looked at the back of Frank's head as he laughed at the bar. I looked at Madison posing for another selfie, making sure to angle her body so I wasn't in the frame. They had no idea. "Ms. Lewis." I turned. A young man in a sharp black suit was standing there, holding a tablet. He looked nervous. I recognized him. He was the event manager for the venue. I had dealt with him directly when we renegotiated the building's catering contracts 3 months ago, though I had done it over Zoom with my camera off, as I usually did. But he knew my name, and more importantly, he knew who signed the checks. He lowered his voice, leaning in so the guests nearby wouldn't hear. "I apologize for interrupting, Ms. Lewis," he said, his tone respectful, deferential, the exact opposite of how my future in-laws had just spoken to me. "I saw you arrive and I wanted to double-check something before the night ends. Do you want the venue invoice finalized tonight? Or should I route it directly to your holding company's internal account as a write-off?" He waited, pen hovering over the tablet. I looked at Madison, who was now clinking glasses with her mother, celebrating their victory over the poor sister. I looked at Frank, who was acting like he owned the place. I looked back at the manager. A slow, cold realization washed over me. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to throw a drink. I had something much more powerful than a scene. "Finalize it," I said softly. "But send the copy to my personal desk. I want to review every single line item." The manager nodded, tapped his screen, and vanished back into the shadows. I took a sip of my lukewarm water and watched the party continue. They were dancing on my floor. They were drinking under my roof. And come Monday morning, The music was going to stop. To understand why I stood on that rooftop, silently accepting insults from a woman whose handbag cost less than my weekly charitable donations. You have to understand the architecture of the Lewis family. Every family has a structure, a blueprint that dictates how the emotional load is distributed. In my house, my brother Ethan was the spire, the tall, shiny thing that reached for the heavens and caught everyone's eye. I was the foundation. I was buried underground, unseen, essential for keeping the whole thing upright, but utterly uninteresting to look at. It was never abusive. I want to be clear about that. My parents, Greg and Linda, loved me. But they loved me in the way you love a reliable Honda Civic, whereas they loved Ethan in the way you love a vintage convertible that might break down but looks spectacular in the driveway. At dinner tables throughout my childhood, the questions were always weighted differently. For Ethan, the questions were about possibilities. How is the football team? Who are you taking to the dance? What colleges are sending you brochures? For me, the questions were maintenance checks. Are your grades still good? Is your car running okay? Do you need money for gas? They assumed I was fine because I never gave them a reason to think otherwise. I was quiet. I was organized. I did my homework without being asked and filed my own taxes the moment I turned 18. To them, my competence was a relief, not a point of pride. It meant they could focus all their energy on Ethan, who was brilliant but chaotic, charming but directionless. The divergence in our paths and the beginning of the secret life I led started when I was 22. We had an aunt, my father's sister Sarah, who was the black sheep of the family. She was abrasive, chain-smoked menthols, and refused to come to Thanksgiving because she hated my mother's turkey. When she died of a sudden stroke, the family braced themselves for debts. Instead, she left a will that confused everyone. To Ethan, she left her vintage record collection and $5,000 in cash. To me, she left a 20% stake in a small, struggling property management firm in downtown Raleigh called City Stone Management. My parents were horrified. They sat me down at the kitchen table, their faces grave. "It is a burden, Isla," my father had said, pushing the legal documents away like they were contaminated. "The company is in debt. The partners are fighting. Just sell the stake back to the other owners for whatever they will give you. Take a few $1,000s and go on a trip. Buy some nice clothes." They saw a headache. I saw a balance sheet. I had just finished my degree in finance, and while my peers were chasing flashy internships at investment banks in New York, I was fascinated by the unsexy, invisible machinery of wealth. I looked at Aunt Sarah's burden and saw that the company managed 4 apartment buildings in a district that the city was planning to rezone for commercial development within 3 years. The company was losing money because of bad bookkeeping and lazy maintenance, not because the assets were bad. "I am going to keep it," I told them. My mother sighed, the long, suffering sigh of a woman who believes her daughter is making life harder than it needs to be. "Oh, Isla, why do you always have to take the hard road? Ethan is using his money to go to Europe. You are going to use yours to argue with plumbers." She was right. For the next 3 years, that is exactly what I did. I did not go to Europe. I did not buy new clothes. I moved into a studio apartment that was smaller than my childhood bedroom and worked 2 jobs. By day, I was a junior analyst at a logistics firm, a job my parents understood and bored their friends with. By night and on weekends, I was learning the property game from the inside out. I learned that wealth is not built on big, flashy paydays. It is built on margins. It is built on renegotiating a waste management contract to save 3%. It is built on knowing that if you replace the HVAC filters every month instead of every 3, the units last 4 years longer. I bought out the other 2 partners of Aunt Sarah's firm when they panicked during a market dip. I used every cent of my savings and took a loan with an interest rate that made my stomach turn. But I knew the numbers worked. I rebranded, restructured, and ruthlessly cut costs. By the time I was 25, the company was profitable. By 26, I had leveraged those assets to buy my first commercial building, a dilapidated warehouse that I converted into office spaces, but I never told my parents. At first, it was because I was afraid of failing. I did not want them to see me crash and burn. But then, as the successes started piling up, the silence became a choice. I remember one Sunday lunch vividly. I had just closed a deal to acquire a strip mall in Greensboro. The acquisition would net me 6 figures in annual passive income. I was vibrating with adrenaline, feeling powerful, feeling like I had conquered the world. I sat down at my parents' table, and my mother handed me a bowl of mashed potatoes. "Ethan got a promotion," she announced, beaming. "He is now a senior associate. He gets his own office with a window." "That is great," I said, and I meant it. "Congrats, Ethan." "It is a big step," my father added, clapping Ethan on the back. "He is really making a name for himself. And how are you?" "Isla still at the logistics place." "I am doing well," I said. "Actually, I have been working on some new projects." "That is good, sweetie," my mother interrupted, not maliciously, just dismissively. "As long as you can pay your rent, if you ever need help, we can send you a little something. We do not want you struggling while Ethan is doing so well. It would not be fair." I stopped. The fork froze halfway to my mouth. Struggling. They looked at my sensible shoes and my lack of jewelry and saw struggle. They did not see that I had just signed a check for $300,000 as a down payment. They did not see that my sensible shoes were worn out because I walked construction sites to ensure my contractors were not cutting corners. In that moment, I realized something profound. They needed me to be the struggling one. It fit the narrative. Ethan was the star who needed applause. I was the sturdy, slightly pitiable rock who needed support. If I told them I was already out-earning Ethan by a factor of 10, it would not make them happy. It would confuse them. It would disrupt the equilibrium of the family. It might even make Ethan feel insecure. And my parents protected Ethan's ego like it was a Faberge egg. So, I ate my potatoes. "Thanks, Mom," I said. "I am okay. I am managing." "Good girl," my father said, turning back to Ethan. "Now, tell us about this window office." From that day on, I compartmentalized my life completely. I created Lewis Grove Holdings. I hired lawyers to set up a series of LLCs and blind trusts. My name appeared nowhere on public records. If you looked up the owner of the Harbor Point Tower, you would see a generic corporate entity registered in Delaware. You would have to dig through 5 layers of legal shielding to find Isla Lewis. I told myself it was for privacy. In the real estate world, being a young woman often meant being a target for sharks who thought they could intimidate you. Anonymity was a shield. It allowed me to walk into meetings and be underestimated, which was my greatest tactical advantage. But deep down, I knew the other reason. I hid my success because I wanted to see who people were when they thought I was nobody. It became a test, an unfair test, perhaps, but one I could not stop administering. Ethan was the one who pained me the most. He was not like our parents. He didn't pity me. He just forgot to check. He was so consumed by his own trajectory, his own shining light, that he assumed I was static. When he moved to Charlotte for the job at Brightwell, he called me, excited. "You should move here too, Isla," he said. "The city is booming. Maybe you can find a better job. Get out of that admin rut." I was already living in Charlotte. I had been living there for 2 years, overseeing the renovation of a historic hotel I had purchased. I was not in an admin rut. I was the landlord of the building he was interviewing in. "I am actually in Charlotte, Ethan," I said gently. "Oh, right." He laughed. "I forgot. Well, we should grab dinner, my treat. I know things are tight for you." He took me to a burger joint. He paid the $40 bill with a flourish, looking so proud to be the big brother taking care of his little sister. I let him. I let him feel like the provider. I sat there, eating a burger I could have bought the franchise rights to, and listened to him talk about his new coworkers. "There is this girl," he said, his eyes lighting up in a way I had never seen before. "Madison. She works in marketing. Her whole family is at the company. They are intense, but she is amazing. Isla. She is so put together. You would like her. She has this way of walking into a room and owning it. I felt a prickle of unease. Owning a room is not the same as filling it with hot air. Ethan? He laughed, waving off my concern. You are just cynical. You spend too much time with spreadsheets. You need to meet people. Madison says appearance is everything in this town. Maybe she can take you shopping, help you update your look. I looked down at my simple blouse. It was silk, high quality but unbranded. I am fine with my look, Ethan. I know, he said soothingly. You are practical. That is what I love about you, Isla. You are low maintenance. Madison is high maintenance, but she is worth it. Low maintenance. That was the phrase that stuck. It meant I required no effort. It meant I could be placed on a shelf and ignored until I was needed. As Ethan's relationship with Madison progressed, I saw less and less of him. When I did see him, he was different. He was polishing himself to fit into her world. He started wearing watches he couldn't afford and talking about networking instead of his actual engineering work. He was desperate to impress her family, the Reeds. He told me they were clannish and protective, which I translated to mean judgmental and controlling. I met them once, briefly, before the engagement party. It was a quick lunch near their office. Frank and Tracy Reed barely looked at me. They spent the entire hour asking Ethan about his career trajectory and subtly hinting that he needed to upgrade his car. When the check came, Frank made a show of reaching for it, then accidentally left his wallet in the car. Ethan paid. I saw the panic in his eyes. It was a $200 lunch, and I knew he was maxing out his credit cards to keep up with Madison's lifestyle. I wanted to slide him an envelope of cash under the table. I wanted to tell him, I can buy this restaurant. Ethan, let me help you. But I didn't, because if I did, I would have to explain everything. I would have to explain the years of lying by omission. I would have to explain that while he was playing the part of the successful golden child, I had actually become the tycoon, and I was terrified that if I stripped away his role as the successful one, there would be nothing left of our relationship. So I stayed silent. I stayed Isla, the admin assistant. I stayed Isla, who needs help with rent, and that silence is what led me to the rooftop. It is what allowed Madison to lean into my ear and whisper her poison, thinking she was kicking a stray dog, not realizing she was poking a sleeping dragon. The most dangerous thing about my family's assumption of normalcy was not that it hurt my feelings. I had grown past that. The danger was that it made them careless. They thought they knew the playing field. They thought they knew the players. They looked at me and saw a pawn. They did not know that for the last 7 years. I had not been playing their game at all. I had been building the board. The night of the engagement party, after the manager walked away with his instructions to send the invoice to my desk, I stood alone for a moment longer. I watched Ethan laughing with Frank Reed. Frank had his hand on Ethan's shoulder, a heavy, possessive grip. I saw Madison whisper something to her mother, and they both glanced in my direction and smirked. They were comfortable. They felt safe in their superiority. I took a sip of water, the condensation cool against my palm. I thought about the complexity of the corporate structure I had built. I thought about the vendor audit I had initiated with a single text message. My lawyer, Derek, had once asked me why I kept the structure so complicated. Why not just put your name on the door? Isla, he had asked. Why hide? Because, I had told him, when you are invisible, people show you who they really are. They don't edit themselves for the boss. They don't fake kindness for the check signer. I had the truth now. I had the raw, unedited footage of who the Reeds were, and I had the truth of who my brother became when he was with them. The invoice the manager would send was not just a bill for canapes and champagne. It was the first piece of paper in a trail that would lead right back to the one thing the Reeds respected more than anything else: ownership. I set my glass down on a passing tray. I smoothed the wrinkles of my dress. I was done hiding in the corner. I was done being the low-maintenance sister. If they wanted a show, if they wanted to talk about who ruined the photos, I would give them a picture they would never forget. But first, I needed to go to work. The party was just a prologue. The real event was scheduled for Monday morning. 900 hours sharp. And unlike this party, I would not be late. Most people assume power's loud. They think it looks like Frank Reed's booming laugh, or Madison's desperate need to be the center of every photograph. They think it is shouting orders, demanding the corner office, or putting your name in gold letters on the side of a building. I learned very early on that real power is silent. Real power is not the person shouting on the bridge of the ship. It is the ocean current underneath that decides where the ship goes. By the time I was 25, the small inheritance from Aunt Sarah had been transformed into something unrecognizable. I had incorporated Lewis Grove Holdings, a name I chose deliberately. It sounded established. It sounded like old money, like oak-paneled boardrooms, and men in three-piece suits smoking cigars in the 1950s. It did not sound like a young woman who bought her clothes off the rack and drove a 5-year-old sedan. Lewis Grove Holdings was the umbrella. Underneath it sat a quiet, diverse portfolio of commercial real estate and, more importantly, private equity stakes in service companies. I liked boring businesses. I liked companies that fixed things, cleaned things, or processed data. They were recession-proof. They were the plumbing of the economy. Brightwell Analytics was my masterpiece of acquisition. 3 years ago, Brightwell was not the shiny, arrogant corporate entity my brother's future in-laws bragged about. It was a sinking ship. They had overexpanded into the European market, hemorrhaged cash, and were facing a liquidity crisis that was going to force them into bankruptcy within 90 days. Their original board was panic-stricken. They were looking for a savior. But the banks had closed their doors. That was when Lewis Grove Holdings stepped in. I did not walk into their boardroom. I sent Derek Shaw, my lead counsel. Derek is a man who speaks in a voice so soft you have to lean in to hear him, which is a terrifying tactic in negotiation. He laid out our offer a capital injection of $15 million to clear their immediate debt and restructure their operations. The terms were brutal but necessary. Lewis Grove would take 51% of the equity, we would take 3 seats on the 5-person board, and we would have the unilateral right to replace executive leadership if performance metrics were not met for 2 consecutive quarters. They signed. They had no choice. But here was the key, the clause that allowed Frank and Tracy Reed to sleep soundly at night, completely unaware of who actually signed their paychecks. I insisted on a silent partner protocol. Lewis Grove Holdings was listed as the majority shareholder, but I did not take a visible role. I did not want to be CEO. Being CEO is a job. It is meetings. It is shaking hands. It is pretending to care about people's weekends. I already had a job. I was an investor. I hired a CEO, a sharp, seasoned operator named Marcus, to run the day-to-day. Marcus answered to the board. The board answered to me. To the employees of Brightwell, to people like Tracy in HR and Frank in facilities, the ownership was just a vague concept. They knew they were owned by an investment group. They probably imagined a faceless conglomerate based in New York or London. They certainly did not imagine that the majority shareholder was the woman who sat in the back of the room during the quarterly town hall meetings, taking notes on an iPad, looking like a junior consultant. I attended those meetings precisely because nobody looked at me. It is amazing what you hear when people think you are irrelevant. I heard managers complaining about budget cuts I had authorized. I heard rumors about inter-office affairs. I heard the real culture of the company, not the sanitized version presented in PowerPoint decks. The move to Harbor Point Tower was my decision. 2. Brightwell's lease at their old office park was expiring. I owned Harbor Point, a 20-story glass monolith in the financial district. It made perfect financial sense. I moved Brightwell into floors 12 through 15. It was a symbiotic loop. My company paid rent to my other company. I was moving money from my left pocket to my right pocket and building equity on both sides. I loved that building. I loved the way the morning light hit the steel beams in the lobby. I loved the hum of the high-speed elevators. When I walked into Harbor Point, the security guards, maintenance staff, and the cleaning crews all greeted me by name. "Morning, Ms. Lewis." "Good morning, David. How is your daughter's knee surgery recovering?" They knew me because I signed the checks for the building's operations. I approved their overtime. I ensured their break room had decent coffee. To the blue-collar staff, I was the boss. But when the elevator doors opened on the 12th floor, the Brightwell executive floor, I became a ghost. I would step out of the elevator, and the Brightwell employees would rush past me, eyes on their phones, clutching their lattes, important and busy. If I bumped into someone, I was the one who apologized. "Excuse me," I would say. "Watch it," they would mutter, not even looking up. I never corrected them. I stored it. Every interaction was data. My management philosophy was simple, born from years of being the person nobody noticed. Treat the people at the bottom better than the people at the top. The janitor knows more about the health of a company than the VP of marketing. If the trash isn't being emptied, morale is low. If the bathrooms are dirty, the company is failing. Because of this, Lewis Grove Holdings had a strict, ironclad code of conduct. It wasn't the usual corporate fluff that gets printed in a handbook and ignored. It was a document I had written myself. Rule number 1: zero tolerance for harassment, bullying, or discrimination. Rule number 2: financial integrity is absolute. $1 stolen is the same as 1 million. Rule number 3: no one is untouchable. I enforced these rules with a terrifying efficiency, but always through my proxies. That is where Nina Brooks came in. Nina was my chief operating officer. She was 45, had hair the color of steel, and possessed a mind like a diamond cutter. She was the face of Lewis Grove when the hammer needed to fall. If I was the architect, Nina was the demolition expert. We spoke 5 times a day. She knew everything. She knew about Ethan. She knew about my parents. She knew exactly why I drove a sedan and wore off-the-rack suits. "You like being the spy," Nina had told me once, swirling a glass of red wine at a debriefing dinner. "You get a kick out of it. It is your superhero alter ego, by day, mild-mannered sister, by night, corporate raider. I am not a raider," I had corrected her. "I am a builder. Raiders strip assets. I build value, but I cannot build value if I'm dealing with egos. The moment people know I am the owner, they start performing. They hide their mistakes. They polish the truth. I need the raw truth." And the raw truth was what I had seen at the engagement party. The Reeds were not just rude people. They were symptoms of a rot within my investment. Frank Reed worked in facilities and vendor management. That meant he had the power to award contracts for maintenance, supplies, and repairs. It was a position ripe for kickbacks if you weren't careful. And the way he had bragged about invoice approvals and managing numbers on the rooftop sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with social anxiety and everything to do with fiduciary duty. Tracy Reed worked in HR. She was the gatekeeper of culture. If she was the kind of person who openly mocked a guest for their appearance, what kind of culture was she enforcing at Brightwell? Who was she hiring? Who was she firing? If she treated her son-in-law's sister like trash because of a dress code, how did she treat a junior analyst who made a mistake? And Madison thought she was marrying into safety. She thought Ethan was her ticket to a power couple lifestyle within the Brightwell ecosystem. She thought she was untouchable because her parents were established in the company. They had built their entire sense of self-worth on a foundation of sand. And I owned the beach. Monday morning was going to be a bloodbath, but it had to be executed with surgical precision. I could not just storm in and fire them because they were mean to me. That would be emotional. That would be petty. And worse, it would open Lewis Grove up to lawsuits for wrongful termination. I needed cause. I sat at the desk in my home office. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the engagement party venue. My office was minimalist, a large oak desk, 3 monitors, and a wall of bookshelves. The only luxury was the chair, an ergonomic masterpiece that cost $2,000 because I spent 12 hours a day in it. I pulled up the Brightwell organizational chart on the left screen. I pulled up the Lewis Grove internal audit software on the right. I typed a message to Derek Shaw. Subject: urgent review. Brightwell personnel. Derek, I need full access to the vendor logs for the facilities department for the last 24 months. Specifically anything signed off by Frank Reed. Cross-reference with any external entities that have less than 3 years of credit history. I typed a second message to Nina. Nina, I need an HR audit on Tracy Reed. Pull her case files. Look for patterns in disciplinary actions. Specifically, look for complaints regarding hostile work environment that were dismissed or settled without board review. I paused. My finger hovered over the enter key. I thought about Ethan. I thought about the way he looked at Madison. Like she was the sun. This was going to hurt him. There was no way around it. If Frank and Tracy were dirty, and my gut told me they were, Ethan was going to be caught in the crossfire. He would see his perfect new family dismantled piece by piece. But I remembered Madison's whisper. Poor people ruin the photos. It wasn't just an insult. It was a worldview. It was a belief that some people are props and others are protagonists. It was a belief that rules apply to the little people. While the important ones can do as they please, I could not have that poison in my company. It was a liability. I hit send on both emails. Then, I opened a third window. It was a draft email to the current CEO of Brightwell. Marcus. He was a good man, but he had a blind spot for legacy employees like the Reeds. He assumed that because they had been there for 10 years, they were loyal. He didn't realize that tenure often breeds entitlement. I wrote a short directive. Marcus, effective immediately, I am initiating a top-down compliance audit of the Charlotte HQ. My team will be on site at 0800 hours tomorrow. Please ensure all department heads are present and that all digital logs are frozen. Do not announce this. I want business as usual until we walk through the door. We have reason to believe there are significant breaches in our vendor protocols and HR code of conduct. This is not a drill. I read it over. It was cold. It was professional. It was the voice of Lewis Grove Holdings. I moved the cursor to the signature line. I never used titles in my internal emails to the executive team. I didn't need to put owner or chairwoman. They knew. The lack of a title was the ultimate flex. It meant I didn't need to remind you who I was. You already knew who I was. I typed 2 words. Isla Lewis. I closed my laptop. The screen went black. Reflecting my face, no makeup. Hair tied back. Eyes tired but alert. The Reeds thought Monday was just another day to walk into Harbor Point Tower, drink the free coffee, and push people around. They thought they were the main characters. They were about to find out that their entire stage had just been bought out. The story of how Ethan met Madison is the story of a moth locating a very expensive, very beautifully designed flame. It happened 6 months before the rooftop party, right in the belly of the beast I had purchased. Ethan had moved to Charlotte for a technical partnership program. He was a structural engineer, brilliant with load-bearing walls, but somewhat hopeless with social structures. Brightwell Analytics had just launched a new division focused on smart building infrastructure, and they needed engineers to consult on the hardware integration. It was a prestigious contract. When he told me he got it, he was beaming. It is at Harbor Point Tower, Isla, he had told me over the phone, his voice cracking with excitement. The place is a fortress. Glass and steel? Top tier. I remember smiling into the receiver, sitting in my home office with the deed to Harbor Point Tower filed in the drawer next to my knee. I am sure it is very impressive, I had said. Just make sure you read the contract details. He started in October. 2 weeks later, he met Madison. It happened in the cafeteria on the 12th floor. I knew that cafeteria well. I had approved the budget for the organic salad bar and the espresso machines that cost more than my first car. I wanted the employees to feel valued, so I made sure the space felt like a high-end bistro, not a corporate feeding trough. Ethan told me the story later. His eyes glazed over with that specific kind of infatuation that makes smart men stupid. He was standing in line for a sandwich, looking at his phone, probably analyzing a schematic. He didn't realize he was blocking the flow of traffic until a hand touched his arm. "You are going to cause a gridlock if you do not choose between the turkey or the ham," a voice said. He turned around, and there she was, Madison Reed. She was wearing a tailored blazer and a smile that she had practiced in the mirror until it was weaponized. She didn't look like an employee. She looked like a stakeholder. She held her tray with one hand and gestured to the line behind him with the other. "I am sorry," Ethan stammered. I am new. I know," she said, stepping around him to grab a sparkling water. I make it my business to know the new faces. You are the engineer from the partnership program. Ethan, right? He was floored. How did you know that? People talk, she said, flashing that bright, terrifying smile. I am Madison. I work in marketing. And if you are going to survive here, you need to know that the turkey is dry, but the roast beef is decent. She didn't just give him advice on sandwiches. She gave him an entry pass. She invited him to sit at her table, in a company like Brightwell. The cafeteria seating chart was as rigid as a high school hierarchy. There were the IT guys in the corner, the sales sharks by the window, and then there was Madison's table. It was the center of gravity. Ethan sat down, and for the first time in his life, he felt like he was part of the in crowd. It was amazing, Ela, he told me later that night. She is not just pretty, she is connected. She knows everyone. She knew the security guard's schedule. She knew which VP was having a bad quarter. She reads the room like I read a blueprint. She sounds intense, I said cautiously. She is confident, he corrected me. And the crazy part, her whole family is there. Her mom is the director of HR. Her dad runs the facilities department. Her sister manages the social media accounts. It is like a dynasty. I felt a little ping of warning in my gut. A dynasty in a mid-sized analytics firm that didn't sound like a dynasty to me. It sounded like nepotism, but Ethan didn't see it that way. It must be nice, he said, his voice softening. To have your family right there with you, walking down the hall and seeing your dad, grabbing lunch with your mom. We never had that. Isla. Mom and Dad were always, distant. That stung. I knew what he meant. Our parents were present physically, but absent emotionally, always more concerned with appearances than connection. Ethan saw the Reeds as the antidote to our lonely childhood. He saw a tight-knit clan, a pack that moved together and protected their own. They sound very close, I said, keeping my tone neutral. They are, Ethan said. Madison invited me to drinks with them on Friday. She said her dad wants to vet the new talent. He laughed, but I could hear the pride. He wanted to be vetted. He wanted to be chosen. I started paying attention, not to Ethan, but to the Reeds. I was sitting in a quarterly budget review meeting via Zoom a week later. My camera was off, and my name was listed simply as LG Holdings Rep. The CEO, Marcus, was running through the operational costs. We are seeing a spike in facilities maintenance, Marcus said, pulling up a slide. Vendor costs for the third quarter are up 15%. Why the jump? I typed into the chat box. We had some emergency HVAC repairs, the CFO chimed in, and we switched to a new supply vendor for the break rooms. The director of facilities, Frank Reed, assured us it was a necessary upgrade for quality control. Frank Reed. I wrote the name down on my notepad. Necessary upgrade. Can we see the competitive bids for that vendor switch? I typed. There was a pause on the line. We do not have the full bid packets on file, the CFO admitted. Frank handled it directly. He has a long-standing relationship with the supplier. Long-standing relationship, in the corporate world. That is often a polite way of saying kickback. I did not say anything then. I did not demand an audit. Not yet. I wanted to see how deep the rot went. If Frank was funneling money to a buddy's company, that was theft. But if he was doing it while his daughter was seducing my brother, that was a trap. As the months went on, Ethan fell harder. He started using corporate buzzwords in casual conversation. He started dressing differently. The comfortable flannels and jeans disappeared, replaced by stiff button-downs and loafers that looked uncomfortable. Madison says I need to dress for the job I want, not the job I have. He told me when I met him for coffee. He looked tired. He looked anxious. But he also looked desperate to please her. And what job is that? I asked. You are a senior engineer. Ethan, you are already successful. The job of a leader, he said, repeating a line that sounded like it came straight from a motivational poster. Madison thinks I have executive potential. Her dad thinks so too. Frank said he could put in a good word for me with the VP of operations. Ethan, I said gently, you are an engineer. You love building things. Do you really want to be in operations? It is just spreadsheets and politics. He looked away. It is about the future. Isla, Madison and I are talking about the future, and if we're going to be a power couple, I need to step up. Power couple. That was the turning point. That was when I knew this wasn't love. It was a merger. Madison wasn't looking for a husband. She was looking for an accessory. She needed someone handsome, employable, and malleable to complete her brand, and Ethan, with his golden retriever heart and his desire for family, was the perfect candidate. The engagement happened 4 months in. It was fast, too fast, but the Reeds operated on speed. They wanted to lock him down before he realized what he was signing up for. Ethan wanted to propose on a hike. He loved the outdoors. He wanted it to be just the two of them, on a mountain peak at sunrise. Madison said no to the hike, he told me, looking a little defeated. She said it is too sweaty. She wants me to do it at this French restaurant downtown, the one with the 3-month waiting list. Did you get a reservation? I asked. Her mom pulled some strings, he said. Tracy knows the owner. She handles everything. Isla, it is amazing. It didn't sound amazing. It sounded controlling. After the proposal, which was live-streamed by Kayla, the sister, and gathered 300 likes within an hour, the planning for the engagement party began. This was where the mask truly slipped. I met Ethan for lunch 2 weeks before the party. He looked exhausted. He was staring at a spreadsheet of costs that Madison had sent him. $20,000 for a party. Isla, he whispered, looking pale. I told her we could just do a backyard barbecue. Get a keg, some good brisket, keep it real. What did she say? I asked, sipping my tea. She said that is fine for my friends, but not for her world, Ethan said, rubbing his temples. She said an engagement party is a statement. It tells people who we are going to be. She said if we start cheap, people will treat us cheap. And her parents. They agree with her, Ethan said. Frank told me, son, you have to spend money to look like money. He said it is an investment in our image. They chose the rooftop venue. They said it is the only place in town that sends the right message. I looked at my brother. He was drowning in debt and expectations, trying to buy admission into a club that wasn't even worth the cover charge. He thought the Reeds were teaching him how to be elite. He didn't realize they were just teaching him how to be pretentious. Ethan, I said, leaning forward, do you want this, the rooftop, the $300 champagne, the photographers? He hesitated. For a second, I saw the old Ethan, the one who liked camping and cheap beer and honest conversation. But then, the shadow of Madison fell over his face. I want to make her happy, he said. She has this vision, Isla. She has been planning this since she was a little girl. Who am I to ruin it? You are the groom, I said. It is your life too. It is just a party, he said, trying to convince himself. Once we are married, it will settle down. We will be a normal family. Sunday dinners, movie nights. That is what matters. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him that people who treat a marriage like a press release do not have movie nights. They have strategy sessions. But I knew I couldn't say it. If I attacked Madison now, while he was in the throes of engagement fever, I would lose him. He would see me as the jealous, unsupportive sister. He would run straight into the arms of the Reeds, who would tell him that I just didn't understand their level of sophistication. So I made a choice. A hard choice. I would step back. I would let him walk into the lion's den. I would let him stand on that rooftop and see exactly what kind of people he was marrying. Okay, I said. If it makes you happy, Ethan, I support you. He smiled, relieved. Thanks, Isla. I knew you would get it. Oh, and Madison wanted me to try to dress up a bit for the party. She is really worried about the aesthetic. He said it apologetically, but he still said it. I will do my best, I said. That afternoon, I went back to my office. I pulled up the vendor file for Frank Reed again. I looked at the numbers. They were sloppy. He was getting arrogant. He was approving invoices for consulting fees from a company registered to a residential address in a suburb 20 miles away. I could have called the CEO right then. I could have had Frank escorted out of the building by security before the sun went down. The engagement party would have been canceled. Ethan would have been heartbroken. But he would have been saved. But he wouldn't have learned. He would have blamed me. He would have thought I destroyed his chance at happiness out of spite. No. He needed to see the ugliness for himself. He needed to see Madison not as the girl in the cafeteria who offered him a seat, but as the woman who would shame his own sister to protect a photo opportunity. I closed the file. I would wait. I would let them have their party. I would let them drink their champagne and toast to their own brilliance. And I would let Ethan see, with his own eyes, that the family he idolized was nothing but a group of grifters in expensive suits. The trap was set, but I wasn't the one who set it. They had set it for themselves. Years ago, I was just the one who was going to snap the lock shut. The irony of the venue selection was almost too perfect. The kind of coincidence that, if I had written it in a novel, an editor would have cut for being unrealistic. Madison had chosen the Gilded Loft, a rooftop event space in the heart of South End. It was trendy, it was exclusive, and it was currently sitting on the asset sheet of one of my subsidiaries, Cityscape Ventures. I stood by the entrance, catching my breath, watching the waiter circulate with trays of mini crab cakes. I knew exactly how much those crab cakes cost. I knew the markup on the champagne was 300%. I knew that the exclusive view of the city was made possible because I had authorized the trimming of the oak trees on the street below 2 months ago. But to everyone else in the room, I was just Isla, the late arrival with the messy hair. A week ago, when Madison had announced the location, she had done so with the air of a magician revealing a tiger. I pulled some serious strings, she had bragged at a family dinner, her eyes sparkling. Normally, the Gilded Loft has a 6-month waiting list and a booking fee of $5,000 just to hold the date, but my dad knows a guy who knows the management. We got the industry insider rate. I had sat there, chewing my salad, fighting the urge to laugh. Her dad didn't know a guy. The management team had flagged the reservation request, saw the last name Reed, which matched the VP of facilities at our tenant company, and sent the request up the chain to my office for approval on a discount. I had signed off on a 50% reduction. I had told my assistant to mark it as a goodwill gesture for a tenant partner. So, in a very literal sense, I had paid for the privilege of being sneered at tonight. I had even offered to cover the catering bill as an engagement gift. I remembered the conversation with my parents vividly. I would like to contribute, I had told them. I can write a check for the food and beverage minimum. Call it $5,000. My mother had looked at me with wide, panicked eyes, as if I had offered to pay in counterfeit bills. Oh, honey, that is very sweet. But are you sure that is a lot of money for you? We do not want you dipping into your savings. The Reeds are used to a certain standard, and we do not want to complicate things with your financial situation. My situation is fine, Mom, I had said. We know. My father had interjected. But let's just let the Reeds handle the planning. You just show up and look nice. That is all we ask. Just show up and look nice. I had failed at 50% of that command. I scanned the room. The lighting was amber and soft, designed to make everyone look 10 years younger and 3 tax brackets richer. My brother Ethan was near the DJ booth, looking handsome but stiff in his tuxedo. He was holding a glass of scotch like a prop. Next to him, Madison was radiating pure, high-voltage vanity. She wore a white sequin dress that caught every beam of light, effectively turning her into a human disco ball. I took a deep breath and stepped fully into the light. Isla? It was my mother. She hurried over to me, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. She was wearing a navy gown that I recognized from a department store sale rack, but she wore it with dignity. However, the look on her face wasn't welcoming. It was mortified. "You are late," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "And look at you. Is that dust on your hem?" I came straight from the Raleigh site. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice low. There was an issue with the structural beams. I didn't have time to go home. You could have changed in the car, she whispered, frantically smoothing down a stray lock of my hair. Everyone is looking. The Reeds are all in black tie. You look like you just came from a shift. I did come from a shift, I said. Work is work. Not tonight. It isn't, she snapped, then softened, her eyes filling with that pity that always made my teeth ache. Just go get a drink. Stand near the back. Do not make a fuss. Ethan is so happy. Let's not spoil it. I nodded and moved toward the bar. I wasn't angry at her. She was operating on a script she had been handed decades ago. Appearances are survival. She didn't know I had rewritten the play. I ordered a sparkling water. The bartender, a young guy with a nose ring, gave me a sympathetic look. Rough day? He asked. You have no idea, I replied. That will be $12, he said. I almost told him that employees of the venue get a shift meal and free soft drinks, a policy I instituted last year. But I stopped myself. I tapped my card. I turned around just in time to see the mobilization of the troops, the photographer, a man with a ponytail and a camera lens the size of a telescope, was waving everyone toward the Instagram wall, a section of the terrace covered in faux ivy and neon lights that spelled out, "Better together." "Family photos," Madison screeched. Her voice was shrill, cutting through the ambient house music. "Everyone, Reeds and Lewises, front and center." This was it, the ritual of the image. I walked over slowly. The Reeds were already in formation. Frank Reed stood in the center, chest puffed out, looking like a kingpin. Tracy Reed was next to him, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. Kayla, the sister, was directing traffic with her phone in one hand and a glass of rosé in the other. Okay. Tall people in the back, short people in the front. Kayla commanded. Mom, suck it in. Dad, stop slouching. Ethan saw me and smiled, a genuine, relieved smile that made me forgive him for a second. Isla, come on, get in here. He reached out a hand to pull me next to him. Wait, Madison said. Her voice was sharp, like a glass shattering. She stepped forward, her eyes scanning the arrangement. She looked at Ethan, then at me, then at the camera. She tapped her chin, feigning deep artistic contemplation. The composition is off, she said. The colors are clashing. She pointed a manicured finger at me. Isla, sweetie, that blue is really dark. It is kind of absorbing all the light. Can you maybe scoot to the edge? Like all the way to the edge? Ethan frowned. Maddie, she is my sister. She should be next to me. I know, babe, Madison cooed, placing a hand on his chest. But for the aesthetic, we want the focus to be on the couple, right? And the parents. The core unit, Isla can anchor the frame on the far left. It balances Kayla on the far right. Just go, Isla, my father muttered from behind me. Do not argue. I moved. I stepped away from my brother and stood at the far end of the lineup. Next to a potted fern, I felt ridiculous. I was practically in the foliage. Perfect, Kayla shouted. Okay, on 3, 1, 2, 3 love, flash, flash, flash. One more, Kayla yelled. Let's do a silly one. Everyone laugh. The Reeds threw their heads back in exaggerated, open-mouthed laughter. It looked like a stock photo for a dental insurance brochure. I managed a polite, closed-lip smile. Okay, got it, the photographer said. Lowering his camera, the group broke apart. I started to walk toward Ethan, wanting to congratulate him properly, but Tracy Reed intercepted me. She held a skewer of grilled shrimp and looked me up and down with the clinical detachment of a biologist examining a specimen. So, Tracy said, her voice loud enough to carry over the music, Ethan tells us you are in property management. That is right, I said. It must be fascinating, she said, though her tone suggested it was about as fascinating as watching paint dry. So what does that involve? Exactly answering phones, collecting rent checks, dealing with clogged toilets? She laughed lightly. I am just teasing, dear. But really, do you work at a front desk? I work in operations, I said, keeping it vague. Operations, she repeated, tasting the word. That sounds fancy. Is that what they call secretaries now? Executive assistants I know at Brightwell. Our admins love to give themselves big titles. I am not an admin, Tracy, I said, my patience fraying. Oh, there is no shame in it, she cried, touching my arm with a patronizing pat. It is honest work, really. Someone has to answer the phones and make the coffee. We need people like you to keep the wheels turning so people like Ethan and Madison can do the big thinking. People like me. People like them. The stratification was so clear to her. Actually, Frank Reed boomed, joining the conversation. He had clearly had a few scotches. His face was flushed. I thought you were the valet Parker when you walked in. I was about to toss you my keys. He slapped his knee and roared with laughter. I am kidding. But seriously, Isla, next time, maybe check the dress code on the invite. It said cocktail chic, not construction site chic. Or is that the new trend? Are we doing the blue-collar cosplay thing? The people around us. Madison's friends, corporate climbers from Brightwell, started to giggle. It was a ripple of laughter that spread outward. They weren't laughing with me. They were laughing at the spectacle of the rich man roasting the poor girl. I looked at Ethan. He was standing 5 feet away. He heard it. I saw his jaw tighten. I saw him look at Frank, then at me. Say something. I willed him. Defend me. Ethan opened his mouth, but then Madison looped her arm through his and whispered something in his ear. Giggling. Ethan closed his mouth. He looked down at his shoes. That silence hurt more than Frank's joke. It was a long drive, I said to Frank, my voice steady. I apologize if my appearance offends you. Oh, do not be so sensitive. Frank waved his hand. We are family now. We roast each other. That is what Reeds do. You have to toughen up if you are going to hang with us, kiddo. He turned his back on me to high-five a colleague. Tracy gave me one last pitying smile and followed him. I was left standing there, the laughter still buzzing in my ears. I felt a hand on my elbow. It was Madison. She wasn't smiling anymore. The mask had dropped completely. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and filled with a profound disdain. She pulled me slightly away from the group, toward a darker corner of the terrace, under the pretense of showing me the view. You are embarrassing him, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it was crystal clear. I am here to support him, I replied. You are here looking like a charity case, she hissed. Do you have any idea who is here tonight? My father's boss, the VP of operations, important people. And then there is you, standing there looking like you just crawled out of a basement. I work for a living, Madison, I said. Real work, not just planning parties. Her grip on my arm tightened. Her fingernails dug into my skin. Listen to me, she said, leaning in close. Her breath smelled of expensive champagne. This is Ethan's new life, my life. We are going places. We are going to be on the top floor, and we cannot drag dead weight with us. She let go of my arm and smoothed the front of her sequined dress. She leaned in one last time, her lips brushing my ear, intimate and cruel. Poor people ruin the photos. Isla. She pulled back, winking at me, her bright fake smile instantly reappearing for the benefit of anyone watching. Just try to stay out of the background, okay? She chirped loudly. Love you. She spun around and floated back toward the center of the party, where the photographer was waiting. I stood frozen. Poor people ruin the photos. It wasn't anger that flooded my system. It was something colder. It was the feeling of ice water in my veins. It was the absolute clarity of a balance sheet that doesn't add up. She thought she had just put me in my place. She thought she had established the hierarchy. She thought I was the dirt on her shoe. I turned away from the party. I walked to the edge of the terrace and looked out at the city. I looked at the Harbor Point Tower in the distance, its lights twinkling in the night. My building, my rules. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my face. I opened my secure messaging app. I found the thread with Nina Brooks, my COO. I didn't hesitate. I didn't tremble. My thumbs moved with the precision of an executioner. Nina, I typed. Monday morning vendor audit. Quiet. Full scope. Facilities and HR focus. I hit send. I watched the little checkmark appear. Delivered. I looked back at the party one last time. Frank was laughing. Tracy was holding court. Madison was posing, her chin tilted up. Perfect and untouchable. Enjoy the champagne, I thought. It is the last thing I'm ever going to buy for you. I stood near the corner of the bar, nursing the same glass of sparkling water I had ordered 20 minutes ago. The ice had melted, diluting the fizz, but I held it like a prop in the corporate world. I had learned that if you hold a drink and look at your phone with a furrowed brow, people assume you are handling a crisis and leave you alone. I was handling a crisis, just not the kind they imagined. I had positioned myself strategically. To my left was a large, decorative pillar wrapped in fairy lights. To my right was a high-top table occupied by Frank Reed, Tracy Reed, and a man I did not recognize. He was short, sweating in a suit that was too tight across the shoulders, and he had the eager, shifty energy of a salesman trying to close a deal before the client sobers up. I turned my back to them, pretending to scroll through my emails. In reality, I was focusing every ounce of my attention on their conversation. My hearing has always been sharp, a trait I developed during years of sitting in the back of boardrooms, listening to executives whisper things they thought the secretary wouldn't understand. The party is top tier, Frank, the sweaty man said. His voice was greasy, ingratiating. You really went all out. The venue alone must be costing a fortune. It is all about leverage, Gary. Frank's voice boomed, lowered slightly but still carrying that heavy, arrogant bass note. You know how it is. Brightwell is practically my home turf now. I make a few calls, remind a few people who signs the maintenance contracts, and suddenly doors open. I stiffened. Maintenance contracts. I hear you, Gary chuckled, the sound of ice rattling in his glass. Speaking of contracts, I wanted to ask about that HVAC renewal for the East Wing. I sent over the revised bid last week. I know the numbers are a little higher than last year, but you know supply chain issues. Don't worry about the numbers, Frank said, dismissing the concern with a wave of his hand that I could practically hear. Just make sure the invoice is formatted the way I like it. Keep the labor costs under the capital expenditure limit, so I do not have to send it up to the CFO. If it stays under $10,000 per line item, I can sign off on it myself. You are the man, Frank, Gary said, his relief palpable. I really appreciate you looking out for us. We look out for each other, Frank replied, his tone dropping to something conspiratorial. Just make sure that referral bonus we talked about finds its way to the usual account. I have a wedding to pay for soon. You know. My grip on my phone tightened so hard my knuckles turned white. There it was. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a confession. Structuring invoices to bypass executive review was a direct violation of the Lewis Grove financial compliance policy. Accepting a referral bonus, a kickback, was fraud. It was theft. Frank Reed wasn't just an arrogant father-in-law. He was a thief stealing from my company to pay for the champagne I was currently drinking. Oh, stop talking shop. You two? Tracy's voice cut in, light and airy but with a steel undercurrent. This is a party. Besides, Frank, you know the numbers are the easy part. As long as HR is quiet, nobody looks at the books too closely. That is why I love you, honey. Frank laughed. You keep the people in line. I keep the building running. HR handles people, not numbers, Tracy said, and I could hear the smirk in her voice. And numbers are easy to manage if the people are scared to ask questions. I had a junior analyst asking about vendor selection last month. Little fresh out of college girl, very nosy. What did you do? Gary asked. I pulled her file, Tracy said casually, as if discussing a dinner recipe. Found a few instances where she was 5 minutes late. Called her in for a performance review. Reminded her that culture fit is just as important as accuracy. She stopped asking questions after that. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. It was a physical sensation, heavy and suffocating. Tracy wasn't just complicit, she was the enforcer. She was weaponizing the Human Resources Department, the very department designed to protect employees, to silence whistleblowers and cover her husband's tracks. They had built a fiefdom inside my company. They were running a protection racket disguised as corporate management. I unlocked my phone and typed a quick note into my secure folder, documenting the time and the exact quotes, invoice structuring, kickbacks, intimidation of junior staff. "Hey, Mom, Dad," Kayla's voice pierced the air. I glanced over my shoulder. The younger Reed sister was stomping toward the table, looking annoyed. She was holding her phone out like a holy relic. "What is it, Princess?" Frank asked. "The staff here is so incompetent," Kayla complained, rolling her eyes. "I was trying to do a TikTok transition video near the buffet, the one where I snap my fingers and the lighting changes, and this janitor just walked right through the frame. He was carrying a trash bag. A trash bag, in the background of my engagement content." "Did you tell him to move?" Tracy asked sympathetically. "I did more than that," Kayla said, looking proud of herself. "I told him that if he did not get out of my shot, I would have him fired. I told him my dad runs the building where his company probably wants a contract." "That is my girl," Frank laughed. "Exerting authority, you have to let the help know who is in charge." "I made him apologize on camera," Kayla giggled. "It is actually kind of funny. I might post it as a blooper. When the help ruins the vibe. #awkward. I felt bile rise in my throat. This family was rot. Absolute, unadulterated rot. They treated human beings like props and obstacles. The janitor, the junior analyst, me, we were all just background noise to their main event. They didn't just think they were better than us. They thought they owned us. I looked across the room to find Ethan. I needed to see him. I needed to see if he was part of this, or if he was just blind. He was near the entrance, being led around by Madison. It looked less like a social mixing and more like a political campaign. Madison had her hand firmly on the small of his back, steering him from one group of guests to another. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows of the large potted plants, moving silently in my sensible flat shoes. "This is Ethan," Madison was saying to a tall man in a gray suit, the VP of sales at Brightwell. "He is leading the new infrastructure project, the one that is going to revolutionize the data center." "Nice to meet you, Ethan," the VP said, shaking his hand. "I have heard good things." "Oh, you will hear more than good things," Madison interjected, her smile dazzling. "Ethan is a visionary, honestly, with the way he is optimizing the grid. He is already operating at a director level. We are expecting big things next quarter." Ethan smiled nervously. "I'm just trying to do good work, sir." "He is too modest," Madison laughed, leaning into the VP. "But we know modesty does not get you the corner office, right? We are so excited for his future here. It is nice to know the company rewards the right kind of people." She emphasized the right kind of people with a look that suggested a secret club. They moved on to the next group. I followed, keeping a safe distance. "And this is my fiancé, Ethan," Madison said to a woman from marketing. "He is pretty much practically running the engineering department already. We are thinking 5 years to the C-suite. Do not you think—" Ethan looked uncomfortable. "Madison, I have only been there 6 months." "Time is relative when you have talent." Madison breezed past his objection. "Besides, once we are married, you are a Reed Lewis. That carries weight." She pulled him toward the buffet, and I maneuvered around a waiter to get within earshot. Madison leaned in close to Kayla, who was now fixing her lipstick. "He is doing okay," Madison whispered to her sister. "But he is so stiff. I have to do all the talking." "He looks good in the tux, though," Kayla noted. "That is what matters for the feed." "I know," Madison said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "But I need him to be aggressive. Once we are married, I am going to have Dad push for his promotion immediately. There is a director spot opening up in Q3. If Dad threatens to pull the vendor contracts, the VP of operations will have to give it to Ethan." "Can they do that?" Kayla asked, looking at her phone reflection. "After we are family, we will ask for whatever we want," Madison said, a cold, hard look entering her eyes. They cannot say no. Dad has too much dirt on the procurement process. If they do not promote Ethan, Dad burns the house down. Ethan is our retirement plan. Kay, he just doesn't know it yet. My breath caught in my chest. It wasn't just nepotism, it was blackmail. They were planning to use Frank's illicit activities, the very fraud I had just witnessed, as leverage to force the company to promote Ethan. They were going to use my brother as a pawn in a scheme to extort my company. Ethan wasn't the beloved fiancé, he was the laundering vessel. They needed a clean face, a golden child engineer to place in a high position so they could consolidate their control. I looked at Ethan. He was standing a few feet away, holding Madison's purse while she fixed her hair. He looked tired. He looked diminished. I wanted to run over and grab him. I wanted to drag him out of there. But before I could move, a figure appeared in my peripheral vision. It was the venue manager again, the young man with the tablet. He looked stressed. He was scanning the room, his eyes darting past the sequins and the tuxedos until they landed on me. He walked straight toward me, bypassing Tracy, bypassing Frank, bypassing the entire royal family. Ms. Lewis, he said, breathless. I froze. I saw Madison turn her head. She was only 10 feet away. She saw the manager approach me. Yes, I said, keeping my voice low. I am so sorry to disturb you again, the manager said, holding out the digital tablet. But the system is requiring a secondary authorization for the overrun costs, because the bar tab exceeded the initial estimate by $2,000. I need the primary account holder's signature to clear the final invoice before we close the register. He thrust the tablet toward me. The screen was bright, glowing in the dim light. At the top of the document, in bold letters, it read, Billed to Lewis Grove Holdings. Attention, Isla Lewis. I looked at the tablet, then I looked at Madison. She was staring right at us, her brow furrowed. She looked at the manager, who was treating the woman in the wrinkled dress like the most important person in the room. She looked at the tablet he was offering me. For a split second, time seemed to suspend. I saw the confusion on her face, the cognitive dissonance. Why is the staff talking to Isla? Why does he need her signature? She is a receptionist. She is a nobody. Then, I saw the denial kick in. It was fascinating to watch. Her brain rejected the information because it didn't fit her reality. She blinked, shook her head slightly, and turned away. She probably thought I was signing for a delivery. Or maybe she thought I was signing to pay for my own drink because I was too poor to be on the open tab. Or maybe she thought I was just being helpful, taking a message for her father. She dismissed me. Again, I turned back to the manager. I took the stylus. Does it include the gratuity for the staff? I asked quietly. Yes, ma'am. 20%. Make it 30, I said. Your team has had to deal with a lot of difficult requests tonight. The manager looked surprised, then grateful. Thank you. Ms. Lewis, I will update it right now. He tapped the screen. I signed my name, Isla Lewis, a simple scrawl, the same signature that was on the deed to the building across the street where Madison went to work every day, the same signature that was on the paychecks of the security guards who let her in. Thank you, I said, handing the tablet back. Have a good night. Ms. Lewis, he said, bowing slightly before retreating. I stood there, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. Madison had turned back to her friends. She was laughing, throwing her head back, her white throat exposed. She had seen the truth. It had been held right in front of her face on a glowing screen, and she had chosen not to see it. That was her fatal flaw. She only saw what she wanted to see. She saw a world where she was the queen and everyone else was a servant. She didn't realize that the servant had just bought the castle. I looked at my phone. I had the recordings in my memory. Frank's confession, Tracy's admission of HR abuse, Madison's plan to blackmail the company for Ethan's promotion, and I had the confirmation of the venue invoice. I had enough. I had more than enough. I didn't need to stay for the cake cutting. I didn't need to stay for the speeches where Frank would undoubtedly make more jokes about my financial status. I slipped my phone into my purse. I smoothed my skirt. I walked toward the exit, passing by the group one last time. "Leaving so soon?" Tracy called out as I passed, not bothering to stand up. "Got an early shift tomorrow." "Something like that," I said, not breaking my stride. "Don't worry," Frank shouted after me. "We will save you a piece of cake. We know you probably don't get the good stuff often." Laughter followed me to the elevator. I stepped inside the steel box and pressed the button for the ground floor. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the sound of their mockery and the bass of the music, silence enveloped me. I looked at my reflection in the polished metal doors. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a poor relation. I saw the CEO of Lewis Grove Holdings. "Monday," I whispered to the empty elevator. 0800. The doors opened to the lobby, and I walked out into the cool Charlotte night. The air was fresh, the city was alive, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to hide. I walked to my car, got in, and drove home to prepare. The party was over. The audit was about to begin. The vibration of my phone on the nightstand woke me up at 2 a.m. It was not an alarm, it was a text message from Ethan. I rolled over in the darkness of my apartment, the silence of the room a stark contrast to the chaos of the party just a few hours prior. The screen's blue light stung my eyes as I read the preview. Ethan. "I am sorry about tonight." The mood got a little weird. "Madison is just stressed about everything being perfect. She thinks you didn't respect the dress code on purpose. She wants me to have a talk with you about boundaries. I told her you were working. Just let's let it cool down." I stared at the words, boundaries. The irony was rich enough to choke on. The woman who had just tried to leverage my brother's employment for a family power grab was lecturing me on boundaries. The woman who had insulted a guest, her future sister-in-law, for not looking wealthy enough, was demanding an apology. I didn't reply immediately. I lay there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I pictured Ethan, likely sitting on the edge of his bed, torn between the sister who had always been his rock and the fiancée who promised him a kingdom. He was trying to be the peacemaker in a war he didn't realize had already started. I typed back a simple, absolving lie. Isla. "It is fine. Ethan, go to sleep. As long as you are happy, that is all that matters." I sent it. Then I blocked his number for the next 12 hours. I did not do it out of malice. I did it because I needed the line clear. I needed to stop being Isla the sister and fully inhabit Isla the chairman. Sleep was impossible after that. I got up, made a pot of black coffee, and opened my laptop. It was 3 a.m. By the time the sun hit the skyline of Charlotte, painting the glass of Harbor Point Tower in hues of pink and gold, I had already reviewed the preliminary data packets. At 7:30, I drove to my office, not the suite at Harbor Point, but the discreet headquarters of Lewis Grove Holdings on the outskirts of the city. It was a nondescript brick building that looked like a dental practice. Inside, it was a fortress of data security. Nina Brooks was already there. She was standing by the smartboard, a tablet in one hand and a croissant in the other. She looked like she had been awake for days, which, knowing Nina, she probably had. "Good morning," Nina said, not looking up from her screen. "I hope you enjoyed the canapés last night. I heard they were overpriced." "The crab cakes were dry," I said, setting my bag down. "And the company was worse. Tell me we have something." Nina tapped the screen, and a stream of data appeared on the wall monitor. It was a visualization of the Brightwell internal network, a web of emails, transaction logs, and access points. "We have more than something," Nina said, her voice grim. "We have a pattern." I initiated the silent audit at 600 hours. The algorithms flagged Frank Reed immediately. I walked over to the board. "Show me." "Okay, look at this," Nina said, expanding a cluster of red dots. "These are vendor payments authorized by Frank in the last 18 months. He is smart enough not to trigger the automatic $50,000 review threshold. Everything is kept just under the radar. But look at the payee. She pointed to a recurring vendor, Apex Maintenance Solutions, LLC. $48,000 for emergency HVAC consultation, I read aloud. $12,000 for lobby lighting reconfiguration, $9,000 for surplus cleaning supplies. Who is Apex Maintenance? That is the fun part, Nina said, a tight smile appearing on her face. I ran a background check on the LLC. It is registered to a P&O box in Gastonia. The registered agent is a man named Gary Vance. I saw him last night, I said, the memory of the sweaty man in the ill-fitting suit flashing in my mind. He was drinking scotch with Frank. Frank called him a partner. Well, they are certainly partners, Nina said, because Gary Vance is also Frank Reed's brother-in-law, or ex-brother-in-law. He was married to Frank's sister for 5 years. They kept the business connection even after the divorce. Nepotism and embezzlement, I murmured. Classic. It gets worse, Nina continued. I cross-referenced the work orders. We have invoices for roof repairs on dates when the building security logs show no contractors entered the premises. He is paying for phantom work. Isla. He is draining the operating budget into his buddy's pocket. And I would bet my annual bonus he is getting a kickback. He bragged about it, I said, my voice cold. He stood 5 feet away from me and told Gary to keep the invoices under the limit so the CFO wouldn't see. He feels completely safe. He won't be safe for long, Nina said. But you wanted to check HR too, Tracy. She handles people, not numbers. I quoted Tracy's words from the party. She said numbers are easy to manage. Nina swiped to a different screen. This one was filled with email chains and personnel files. Tracy Reed is a cleaner, Nina said, her tone disgusted. I found 3 separate disciplinary cases in the last year that vanished. One was a sexual harassment complaint filed by a receptionist against guess who, Gary Vance, the vendor. My stomach turned. She buried it. She deleted it, Nina corrected. She reclassified the complaint as interpersonal conflict due to miscommunication and transferred the receptionist to a different department with a pay freeze. She protected her husband's cash cow by silencing a victim. I stared at the screen, the image of Tracy smiling at me, telling me that answering phones was honest work, burned in my mind. She presented herself as the nurturing mother figure of the company, the gatekeeper of culture. In reality, she was the enforcer of a corruption ring. Isla, Nina said softly, we can lock them out right now. I can cut their access cards. I can have security escort them out before they even finish their morning coffee. We have enough for criminal charges. I hesitated. The logical part of me, the part that protected my assets, wanted to drop the hammer immediately. Every minute they stayed in the building was a risk. But then I thought of Ethan. If I fired them now, remotely, without him seeing the truth, the narrative would be spun against me. Madison would tell him I was jealous. Frank would claim it was a misunderstanding or a political hit job. Ethan, blinded by love and his desire for a family, might believe them. He might resent me forever for ruining his future. No, I said. Not yet. I need them to perform one last time. Perform? Nina asked. They think they own the place, I said. Let them act like it. Let them hang themselves in public. Is Madison at the office? Nina checked a live feed. She just badged in. 9:15. She is late. Pull up the security cameras, I ordered, on the monitor. A grainy but clear feed of the 12th floor lobby appeared. I watched as Madison Reed walked off the elevator. She looked different today, at the party. She had been a socialite. Today, she was walking with a swagger that bordered on aggressive. She wasn't just an employee anymore. In her mind, she was the crown princess. I watched her stop at the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, whom I knew personally because I sent her a gift card when her cat died, smiled and said something. Madison didn't smile back. She leaned over the desk, pointing a finger. I couldn't hear the audio, but the body language was unmistakable. It was dominance. It was the same way she had looked at me on the rooftop. Can we get audio? I asked. 1 second. Nina typed a command. The room filled with the crackle of the lobby microphone. "Need you to clear my calendar for the afternoon," Madison's voice came through, tinny but sharp. "And tell the VP's assistant that I need a slot for a strategy meeting. My fiancé is going to be joining the leadership track, and we need to discuss his trajectory." "I can put in a request, Madison," Sarah stammered. "But the VP is fully booked." "Just tell him it is Madison," she snapped. "He knows who my father is, and frankly, Sarah, fix your blouse. The collar is crooked. It looks unprofessional. We are elevating the brand now." She spun on her heel and marched down the hallway. "She is elevating the brand," Nina repeated, dryly, "by harassing the support staff." "Check Kayla," I said. "She handles social media. What is she posting?" Nina pulled up Instagram on a side monitor. "She posted a story 20 minutes ago. Location tagged Brightwell HQ. The video played. It was Kayla, holding a latte, filming herself in the break room. "Morning, guys," Kayla chirped to the camera. "Back to the grind. But honestly, the vibe is so different now that my sister is officially engaging the future director of engineering. We are basically taking over total power move era." Then, the video cut to a photo from last night. It was the family photo. But cropped. I was gone, cut out of the frame completely. But then, the next slide. It was a candid shot Kayla had taken without me noticing. It showed me standing alone by the fern, looking at my phone, with my hair slightly messy and my dress wrinkled. The caption read, "When the +1 forgets the dress code memo. Awkward charity case." I watched the view count tick up. 100, 200. But then I looked at the comments. Some of Madison's friends were posting laughing emojis, but there were others' comments from accounts I recognized as Brightwell employees. User J99. "Isn't that his sister? That's kinda mean." Admin team lead. "Wow, professionalism." "She is alienating her own colleagues," Nina observed. "They are finding it distasteful." "Good," I said. "Let the resentment build. It will make the transition easier." Just then, a red alert flashed on the main board. "Outgoing call," Nina announced. "Frank Reed's office line. He is calling the vendor. Gary Vance." "Patch it through," I commanded. The room went silent, save for the hum of the servers and the sound of Frank's voice filling the air. He sounded stressed. "Gary, pick up. Pick up." A pause. "Yeah, it is me. Listen, I need you to submit that invoice for the generator maintenance today." "Yes, today." We could hear Gary's muffled voice on the other end. "I thought we were waiting until next month to space it out." "Plans changed," Frank hissed. "I need the cash flow. The wedding deposits are coming up, and Madison wants some specific floral arrangement that costs a fortune. Just bill it as emergency diagnostic. Mark it at $9,500. I will sign it before lunch." "Is it safe, Frank?" Gary asked. "I heard a rumor that the investment group is doing a walkthrough soon." "Don't worry about the investment group," Frank scoffed. "They are absentee landlords. They just cash the checks. Nobody looks at the line items except me. I own this department. Gary, just send the invoice." The line clicked dead. I looked at Nina. She was typing furiously, logging the recording, timestamping it, and saving it to 3 different secure servers. "He just authorized fraud on a recorded line," Nina said, looking up with a mixture of awe and horror. "He is creating a paper trail of his own funeral." "He thinks he is invisible," I said. "He thinks the owner is some old man in a suit in New York who doesn't care about $9,000. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now. The city was awake. Somewhere in that skyline, Ethan was sitting at his desk, probably looking at a blueprint, thinking about how lucky he was to be marrying into such a powerful, loving family. He had no idea that his future father-in-law was stealing to pay for his wedding flowers. He had no idea that his fiancée was bullying the receptionist in his name. "Isla," Nina asked, "what is the play?" "We have the vendor fraud. We have the HR cover-up. We have the hostile work environment. We have the admission of nepotism. Do I call legal? I turned back to the board. I looked at the web of lies the reeds had spun. It was fragile. One tug, and the whole thing would come down. But I needed the audience. I needed the witness. Draft the termination papers, I said, my voice steady. But do not execute them yet. Prepare a file, a physical file. I want every email, every invoice, every transcript printed out in high resolution. And then, I said, checking my watch, I am going to text Ethan. I'm going to invite him and his new family for a little tour. I am going to tell them that I have a special engagement gift for them, a meeting with the ownership team to discuss Ethan's bright future. They will walk right into it, Nina said, realizing the plan. They will think you are just trying to impress them with your lowly connections. Exactly, I said. They will think I am begging for scraps. They will come in expecting to be worshipped, and they will be so busy looking down at me that they won't see the cliff until they fall off it. My phone buzzed again. It was a notification from the bank. The alert I had set up on the Brightwell operating account. Transaction pending Apex Maintenance Solutions. $9, $500. Authorized by F. Reed. He had done it. He had pulled the trigger. Nina looked at her screen. She stopped typing. She took a deep breath and looked at me. Her face serious. Isla, she said, the invoice just hit the system. The money is moving. She paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. We found enough, she said. I nodded. It was done. The investigation was over. Now, it was time for the execution. Get the conference room ready, I said, picking up my bag. And Nina, make sure the coffee is hot. I want them to be comfortable when their world ends. The text message I sent to Ethan was carefully crafted. It had to be vague enough to be intriguing, but specific enough to trigger Madison's ambition. Ethan, I know things were tense last night. I want to make it up to you. I have arranged a meeting at Harbor Point Tower this morning with some people who specialize in executive tracking. Consider it an engagement gift. They can help map out your future. I knew exactly how that message would be digested. Ethan would see an olive branch. Madison would see a ladder. I was standing in the cavernous lobby of Harbor Point Tower at 8:45 in the morning. The space was a cathedral of capitalism's 60-foot ceilings, Italian marble floors that clicked sharply under heels, and a security desk that looked more like the command bridge of a starship. The morning rush was tapering off, but the air still hummed with the energy of billion-dollar decisions being made in the elevators. I wore a charcoal suit. It was tailored, sharp, and commanded attention, a stark departure from the soft, wrinkled dress I had worn on the rooftop. My hair was pulled back in a severe, flawless chignon. I held a leather portfolio in one hand. When the revolving doors spun, they didn't just admit Ethan and Madison, they admitted the entire clan. Frank and Tracy Reed walked in first, looking around with proprietary airs. Frank was wearing a suit that was slightly too shiny for a Monday morning, and Tracy was in a power pink blazer. Madison was clinging to Ethan's arm, wearing a cream-colored dress that looked professional, but cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Even Kayla was there, looking bored and scrolling on her phone, likely dragged along to document the executive meeting. They spotted me by the security turnstiles. Isla, Ethan called out, looking relieved. You look great. Really professional. Thank you, Ethan, I said calmly. Madison looked me up and down. I saw the confusion flicker in her eyes. She was trying to reconcile the charity case from Saturday night with the woman standing before her now. But her arrogance quickly filled in the gaps. She assumed I had dressed up to impress them. Cute suit, Madison said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. Did you get it for an interview? Are you finally trying to get a job in the building? Something like that, I said. Well, we appreciate the gesture, Frank boomed, stepping forward and looking at the security guards with a nod of acknowledgement. Ethan said you know some people in career counseling. That is nice, Isla, really. But you know, I already have the ear of the VP. We probably do not need your little contacts, but we came to be polite. I think you will find these contacts quite useful. Frank, I said, Shall we go up? Do we need visitor passes? Tracy asked, glancing at the security desk. Normally Frank just swipes us in, but since this is your appointment, we should probably follow protocol. I do not want to get you in trouble with security, she said it loudly, ensuring the people nearby knew that I was the outsider and they were the insiders. I turned to the head of security, David. He was a large man, former military, who had been running the desk for 5 years. He saw me turn. He stood up immediately. "Good morning, Ms. Lewis," David said. His voice was not the casual tone he used with tenants. It was the respectful, clipped tone one uses for the commander-in-chief. "Good morning, David," I replied. "I have 5 guests with me. We are going to the 12th floor." "Of course, Ms. Lewis," David said. He didn't ask for IDs. He didn't ask them to sign the logbook. He reached under the desk and produced a single key card. It wasn't the white plastic visitor badge. It was heavy, black matte, with a gold chip embedded in the center. It was the Master Executive Override card. It bypassed all floor locks and summoned the private elevator. David handed it to me with 2 hands. "Elevator A is holding for you." I took the card. "Thank you." I turned back to the group. The silence was deafening. Frank was staring at the black card in my hand. He worked in facilities. He knew what that card was. He knew that even the VP of operations didn't carry that card. That card was for owners and emergency services only. "How did you—" Frank started, then stopped. He looked at David, then back at me. "Isla, did you steal that?" "Don't be ridiculous, Frank," Tracy hissed, though she looked pale. "She probably knows the guard. Maybe they date. It is the only explanation." "Let's go," I said. Walking toward the bank of elevators, I approached the far left elevator, the one marked Executive Use Only. I tapped the black card against the reader. The doors slid open instantly, revealing a wood-paneled interior that smelled of lemon oil and money. We piled in. The space was tight. Ethan stood next to me, looking nervous. Madison was on my other side, her perfume cloying in the small space. I pressed the button for the 12th floor. The button didn't light up white like the others. It glowed a deep, authoritative blue. "Isla," Madison whispered, her voice laced with sudden anxiety. "The 12th floor is the C-suite. That is where the CEO's office is. Are you sure we are allowed up there? If we get caught trespassing, it could ruin Ethan's reputation before he even starts." "We are not trespassing," I said, staring straight ahead at the metal doors. "You do not understand," Frank said, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead. "They have silent alarms up there. If you are taking us to a janitor's closet or a break room to meet some mid-level HR friend of yours, we need to get off on the 11th floor and walk up the stairs. We cannot take the executive lift." "Relax, Frank," I said. "You said Brightwell is your home turf. You should feel comfortable anywhere in the building." The elevator shot upward. My stomach didn't drop, but I saw Tracy grab the handrail. Ding! The doors slid open. We weren't in a hallway. The executive elevator opened directly into the private lobby of the leadership suite. The carpet was thick enough to silence footsteps. The walls were glass, offering a view of the city that made the rooftop bar look cheap. And standing there, waiting in the center of the room like a welcoming committee, were 2 people. On the left was Marcus, the CEO of Brightwell Analytics, a man Frank Reed had probably only seen from a distance at holiday parties. On the right was Nina Brooks, my COO. Frank made a noise that sounded like a dying radiator. "Mr. Sterling," he stammered, looking at the CEO. Madison froze. She recognized the CEO instantly. Her hand flew to her mouth. Marcus didn't look at Frank. He didn't look at Madison. He looked directly at me. He stepped forward, extended his hand, and bowed his head slightly. "Good morning, Ms. Lewis," Marcus said. "We are ready for you." Nina stepped forward next, holding a thick file folder. She didn't smile. She looked at the group with the cold, predatory gaze of a shark circling a life raft. "All distinct entities are present, ma'am," Nina said to me. "Conference room A is prepped." I stepped out of the elevator, The click of my heels on the marble threshold echoed like a gunshot. "Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Nina," I said. I turned to the Reeds. They were still huddled in the elevator, looking like deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Please," I said, gesturing to the open expanse of the executive suite. "Step into my office." Madison was the first to move. She stepped out, her legs trembling. She looked at the signage on the wall behind the reception desk. It was a tasteful, brushed steel logo, Lewis Grove Holdings. Then she looked at me. Isla Lewis. I saw the connection snap into place in her brain. It was violent. Her eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of her head. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. She looked at the poor relation in the charcoal suit, and the reality of the last 6 months came crashing down on her. "You," Madison whispered. "You own this." "I own the holding company," I corrected her, my voice calm and conversational. "Which owns the building, and the land under the building, and 51% of Brightwell Analytics. So, in a manner of speaking, yes, I own where you work." Frank stumbled out of the elevator, clutching his chest. "No, that is impossible. You are a property manager. You fix toilets. I manage assets." "Frank," I said, "Harbor Point is an asset, Brightwell is an asset, and right now, both assets have a pest problem." Tracy let out a small whimper. She looked at Nina, then at me. The condescension was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. She realized that the receptionist she had mocked had full access to her HR files. Kayla, oblivious until the end, finally looked up from her phone. "Wait, why is everyone being weird?" "Isla, can you ask your boss if we can take a selfie in the boardroom?" "Kayla, shut up," Madison screamed. It was a raw, primal scream that shattered her poised facade. Madison turned to me. Her face was a mask of panic. She reached out, trying to grab my hand, but I stepped back. "Isla," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Isla, oh my God. I had no idea. Why didn't you say anything? We were just joking on Saturday. You know that, right? It is just family banter. We love you." "Do not," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Do not insult my intelligence, Madison. Poor people ruin the photos. That wasn't a joke. That was a worldview." "I was drunk," she pleaded, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Tears of fear, not remorse. "I didn't mean it, Ethan. Tell her I was just stressed." She turned to Ethan, desperate for an ally. Ethan was standing by the elevator doors. He looked from me to the CEO, then back to me. He looked like he had been hit by a physical blow. "Isla," he asked, his voice quiet, "is this real? You all this time. I will explain everything to you later." "Ethan," I said gently, "but first, we have business to conclude." I walked past them toward the large glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. "Everyone, inside, now." It wasn't a request. It was a command. They followed me. They had no choice. Frank looked like he was walking to the gallows. Tracy was weeping silently. Madison was hyperventilating. I sat at the head of the long mahogany table. Marcus sat to my right. Nina sat to my left. The Reeds huddled on the other side, huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. Ethan sat slightly apart from them, staring at me with a mixture of awe and confusion. "Welcome to Brightwell," I said, resting my hands on the table. "You have spent a lot of time acting like you own this place. Today, we are going to look at the receipts." The door opened, and a man walked in. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Frank's car, and carrying a leather briefcase. It was Derek Shaw, my lead counsel. The air in the room shifted from social awkwardness to legal danger. Derek didn't look at the Reeds. He walked straight to me, placed a heavy folder on the table, and opened it. "The documentation is finalized, Ms. Lewis," Derek said. His voice was smooth, professional, and terrifying. I slid the folder across the polished wood. It stopped directly in front of Frank Reed. "What is this?" Frank whispered. That, I said, leaning forward, is the invoice for $9,500 you authorized this morning to Apex Maintenance Solutions, along with the bank records linking Gary Vance to your personal account, and the affidavits from 3 other vendors stating you solicited kickbacks. Frank went gray. And underneath that, I continued, looking at Tracy, are the recovered emails from the HR server, the ones you thought you deleted, the ones where you instructed your team to bury sexual harassment complaints to protect your husband's network. Tracy put her head in her hands and sobbed. And finally, I said, looking at Madison, there is a transcript of your conversation from the lobby this morning, the one where you threatened a receptionist and tried to leverage a non-existent promotion for my brother. Madison went silent. She stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. I told you I had an engagement gift, I said, my voice cutting through the silence. The gift is the truth, and the truth is, you are not a dynasty. You are a liability. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the folder, then at Madison. The realization was dawning on him. He wasn't marrying into a powerful family. He was being used as a human shield for a criminal enterprise. Open it, Frank, I said. Read the first page. It is a termination notice, for all of you. The silence in the conference room was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a pressure cooker right before the seal blows. The file folder lay open on the mahogany table, exposing the anatomy of the Reed's corruption like a dissected frog. For a moment, I thought they might have the decency to be ashamed. I thought Frank might hang his head, or Tracy might apologize for the ethical rot she had presided over. I was naive. When you corner a narcissist with the truth, they do not repent. They attack. Tracy was the first to recover. She wiped the tears from her cheeks with a speed that suggested they had never been real in the first place. She sat up straighter, smoothing her pink blazer, and looked at me with a gaze that was no longer terrified, but disappointed. It was a masterclass in manipulation. Isla, she began, her voice trembling with a carefully curated vibrato. I am shocked. Not at the accusations, but at you. Is this how you handle family? You ambush us. You entrap us. I did not entrap you, Tracy, I said calmly. I simply turned on the lights. You are tearing this family apart, she continued, her volume rising. Think about Ethan. Think about your brother. He is finally happy. He finally has a support system, and you are willing to burn it all down because of what? A few accounting errors, a few misplaced invoices. She turned to Ethan, reaching across the table to grab his hand. Ethan pulled his hand back as if she were a hot stove. Tracy didn't flinch. Ethan, honey, she pleaded. Look at her. She is jealous. She has always been the odd one out, hasn't she? She cannot stand seeing you succeed. She cannot stand seeing you loved. If she files these charges, if she fires us, she destroys your wedding. She destroys your future. She will make you hate her forever. Is that what you want? Isla. To lose your brother. It was a low blow. It was a soft threat wrapped in concern. She was holding my relationship with Ethan hostage. I looked at Ethan. He was pale, his eyes darting between the evidence on the table and the woman who had claimed to be his second mother. He didn't speak. He was processing the reality that his support system was actually a parasite. Before I could respond, Frank slammed his hand on the table. Oh, cut the drama. Tracy, Frank barked. He looked at me, his face flushed red, his eyes hard. He decided to take a different route, the fellow conspirator approach. Look, Isla, Frank said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, man-to-man tone. Let's cut the crap. You are a businesswoman. You own the holding company. You know how the sausage is made. The sausage, I repeated, should not involve $48,000 in kickbacks to your brother-in-law. It is the cost of doing business, Frank argued, gesturing wildly. Everyone does it. Every vendor manager in this city takes a little slice off the top. It greases the wheels. It ensures priority service. I made sure those generators were serviced first, didn't I? I kept this building running. So what if I took a little commission? I'm keeping the asset valuable for you. He leaned back, crossing his arms. You should be thanking me. Instead, you are acting like some self-righteous saint. You think your other property managers are clean? Grow up, kid. This is the real world. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. That is how wealth is built. That is how prison sentences are built, Frank, I said coldly. At Lewis Grove Holdings, we do not steal from ourselves, and we certainly do not call theft a commission. You are bluffing, Frank sneered. You won't call the cops. It would be a PR nightmare for Brightwell. Director of Facilities arrested for fraud. Stock prices would dip. You are too smart to hurt your own wallet. I am willing to take a short-term loss for a long-term gain, I countered. Removing a tumor is always painful, but it is necessary for survival. I will ruin you, a voice chirped from the end of the table. We all turned. Kayla was holding her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at me. The red recording light was blinking. I am live right now, Kayla announced, her voice shaking with adrenaline. I have 20,000 followers, Isla, and I'm going to tell them everything. Billionaire owner abuses power to fire her brother's fiancé's family. Rich girl evicts struggling employees just for clout. The internet eats the rich. Isla, by noon, you will be cancelled. Brightwell will be boycotted. She smirked, looking at the screen. Say hi to the stream. Isla, tell them why you hate working-class people. It was a weaponized narrative. She was trying to use the very victimhood she despised to destroy me. My lawyer, Derek, didn't even look up from his notepad. He simply spoke into the air. Ms. Reed, Derek said, his voice baritone and bored. I would advise you to stop recording. You are currently in a private executive session inside a secure facility. Recording this meeting is a violation of the Outcome-Neutral Privacy Act and the Brightwell Employee Handbook. Furthermore, if you post that video, I will file an immediate defamation suit against you personally, and since you are listed as a dependent on your parents' tax returns, which are currently under audit for fraud, I doubt you have the liquidity to fight a $10 million lawsuit. He looked at her over his glasses. Upload it, please. I charge $800 an hour, and I would love to bill Miss Lewis for the time it takes to dismantle your digital footprint. Kayla's thumb hovered over the screen. She looked at Derek, then at Frank. Frank shook his head slightly. Kayla lowered the phone. She ended the stream. The thread evaporated, leaving only a petulant child in a grown woman's chair. You are all bullies, Kayla muttered, crossing her arms. Then, it was Madison's turn. She hadn't spoken since the elevator. She had been staring at the table, her face a mask of shock. Now, she began to cry, but these were not silent tears. These were racking, heaving sobs designed to garner maximum sympathy. I cannot believe this, she wailed, looking at Ethan. Ethan, please, make them stop. Look at what she is doing to us. She stood up and walked toward Ethan, her hands reaching for him. Isla has always hated me. You know she has. From the moment we met. She looked down on me. She is jealous of us. Ethan, she is jealous because you found love and she is alone with her money and her cats or whatever. She planned this. She invited us here to humiliate me because she cannot stand that you are happy. She fell to her knees beside Ethan's chair, burying her face in his lap. It was a performance worthy of a soap opera. I just wanted us to be a family, she sobbed into his trousers. I wanted to help you get promoted so we could have a good life. Was that so wrong? Was loving you so wrong? Ethan looked down at her. His hands hovered over her shoulders, but he didn't touch her. He looked up at me. His eyes were clear now. The fog of infatuation was lifting, burned away by the harsh light of reality. Isla, Ethan said, his voice raspy. Is this true? About the fraud, the HR cover-ups? It is all in the folder. Ethan, I said gently. Every email, every bank transfer. I didn't want to show you this way, but they forced my hand when they tried to use you to blackmail the company. Blackmail? Ethan asked, looking at Frank. We were negotiating. Frank shouted. We were going to leverage my knowledge of the vendor systems to ensure you got the director spot. We were doing it for you, son, to secure your legacy. By threatening to burn the house down, I asked. I heard the recording. Frank, if they do not promote Ethan, Dad burns the house down. That is not negotiation. That is extortion. Ethan stood up. Madison fell back, sitting on the carpet, looking up at him with mascara running down her cheeks. You were going to use me, Ethan said. It wasn't a question. You weren't proud of my engineering. You just wanted a puppet in the C-suite so Frank could keep stealing. No, Madison screamed. I love you. I did it for us. Enough, I said. I stood up. The room fell silent again. Here is the offer, I said, looking at Derek. Derek slid 3 documents across the table toward the reeds. Option A, I said. Frank, you repay the $48,000 you stole. Tracy, you admit to the falsification of HR records, both of you, and Madison, and Kayla. Sign voluntary resignation letters effective immediately. You sign non-disclosure agreements stating you will never discuss Brightwell or Lewis Grove business again. In exchange, I will not file criminal charges. You walk away with a clean record, but no severance, and no references. I paused. Option B, you refuse. I call the police right now. Nina hands over the evidence of embezzlement, fraud, and extortion. You go to jail, and I sue you for civil damages until you have to sell that house you are so proud of. The room was heavy with the weight of the choice. It was a mercy they didn't deserve, but I was doing it for Ethan. I didn't want his engagement to end with his fiancée in handcuffs. Frank started, his bluster gone. He looked at the document. He looked at the restitution amount. I do not have $48,000 in cash. I spent it on the wedding deposits. Then I suggest you get a refund on the flowers, I said. Just then, the door to the conference room opened. A young man, an intern named Kevin, walked in carrying a silver pitcher of water. He looked terrified to be interrupting, but the meeting had gone on for an hour and the glasses were empty. Excuse me, Kevin whispered. I just brought fresh water. He moved quickly to the table. As he reached over to fill Madison's glass, she was back in her chair now, wiping her eyes. His hand shook slightly. A few drops of water splashed onto the sleeve of Madison's cream dress. It was nothing, a minor accident. Water dries. But Madison reacted on instinct. The mask of the weeping victim vanished instantly, replaced by the face of the bully I had met on the rooftop. You idiot! She shrieked. She shoved Kevin's arm away violently. The pitcher wobbled, and more water spilled onto the table. Look what you did, she screamed, jumping up. This is silk. Do you have any idea how much this costs, you stupid, clumsy little? She stopped. She froze. The echo of her voice bounced off the glass walls. She slowly looked around the room. Derek was watching her with an eyebrow raised. Nina looked disgusted. Frank and Tracy looked defeated, but Ethan was looking at her with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It wasn't anger. It was total, absolute recognition. He saw her, finally. He saw that she wasn't stressed. She wasn't drunk. She wasn't protecting her family. She was simply a cruel person who believed she was entitled to abuse anyone she deemed beneath her. Kevin, the intern, was trembling. I am so sorry. Miss, I will get a towel. Leave it, Kevin, Ethan said. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. You are fine. Thank you for the water. Kevin nodded and backed out of the room, closing the door. Ethan looked at Madison. She was breathing hard, her chest heaving, realizing her mistake. It was an accident, she stammered, trying to find the victim mask again. I am just so upset. Ethan? My nerves are fried. I didn't mean to yell. Ethan walked around the table. He stood in front of her. He didn't touch her. You told me you loved my family, Ethan said, but you mocked my sister because of her clothes. You told me you respected the company, but you treat the staff like garbage. You told me you wanted to build a life with me. He paused, looking deep into her eyes. Madison, do you actually love me? Or do you just love the platform you thought I would become? Madison opened her mouth to speak. She looked at her parents. She looked at me. She looked at the expensive office. Ethan, baby, she started, her voice wheedling. Of course I love you. We are a power couple. We are going to take over this town. Think about the wedding. Think about the photos. The photos. Even now, facing the end of her world, she was worried about the image. Ethan closed his eyes. He exhaled a long, shaky breath. He looked like he was waking up from a long, strange dream. She didn't answer the question, I noted from the head of the table. I did, Madison snapped at me, her venom returning. I love him. You are just trying to manipulate him. You are putting words in my mouth. I never said half the things you are accusing me of. I never said poor people ruin photos. I never said I wanted to use him. You are a liar. Am I? I asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I have a policy. Madison, I said, tapping the screen. When I enter a hostile negotiation, I document everything. But Saturday night wasn't a negotiation. It was just a party. And yet, you were loud enough that my phone picked it up quite clearly from my purse. I placed the phone in the center of the table, right next to the termination papers. I pressed play. The audio was crisp, the background noise of the party, the music. The chatter faded away as Madison's voice cut through the room, unmistakably hers. Poor people ruin the photos. Isla. There was a pause in the recording. Then, her voice again, the whisper I had captured on the rooftop. Just try to stay out of the background. Okay. Then, a rustle, and another clip from later that night, the one I had recorded when I was hiding near the plants. After we are family, we will ask for promotions. They cannot say no. Dad has too much dirt on the procurement process. I stopped the playback. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hitting the block. Madison stared at the phone. Her face was drained of color. There was no defense left. No, I was drunk. No, it was a joke. The malice was recorded in high definition. I looked at Ethan. He was staring at the phone, then at the ring on Madison's finger. The background, Ethan whispered, repeating her words. You told her to stay out of the background. He looked at me. She is the owner, Madison. She is the foreground. We were the background the whole time. He turned to Madison. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. I think, Ethan said, we need to talk about the ring. The silence that followed the recording was heavier than the steel beams holding up Harbor Point Tower. Madison's voice, tinny and cruel, seemed to hang in the recycled air of the conference room. Poor people ruin the photos. It was a ghost of her own making, haunting her in real time. I looked around the table. The dynamic had shifted permanently. 10 minutes ago, the Reeds were an outraged family defending their honor. Now, they were defendants in a trial where the evidence was irrefutable. My parents, Greg and Linda, were sitting in the far corner of the room. I had asked Nina to bring them up shortly after the Reeds arrived. I wanted them to witness this, not to hurt them, but because I knew if I didn't show them the raw truth, the Reeds would spin a narrative of victimhood the moment they left the building. My parents looked shell-shocked. They were looking at Frank and Tracy, people they had admired, people they had tried to impress in seeing strangers. Then they looked at me, the daughter they thought needed help with rent. Sitting at the head of the table with a team of lawyers, I placed my hands flat on the cold mahogany. Let us be clear about one thing, I said, my voice steady and devoid of anger. I am not doing this because my feelings were hurt. I'm not doing this because you made fun of my dress or because you tried to shove me into the background of a photo. I looked directly at Frank. I can handle an insult. Frank, I have been underestimated my entire life, but what I cannot handle, and what Lewis Grove Holdings will not tolerate, is theft. What I will not tolerate is a culture of fear that silences victims of harassment. What I will not tolerate is the systemic abuse of power. I nodded to Derek. He slid the final page of the document across the table. Frank Reed, Derek stated, reading from the file with the dispassionate tone of a surgeon listing symptoms. We have traced $48,000 in misappropriated funds to accounts linked to your brother-in-law. That is grand larceny. Frank flinched. He opened his mouth to argue, but the fight had left him. Tracy Reed, Derek continued, we have forensic evidence that you accessed the secure HR server on 3 separate occasions to delete formal complaints regarding hostile work environments and sexual misconduct. That is a violation of federal labor laws and a breach of fiduciary duty. Tracy was staring at her hands, her face ashen. Kayla Reed, Derek finished, looking briefly at the young woman who was now frantically deleting posts from her phone. While you are not an employee, your use of the company premises to harass staff and create defamatory content violates our visitor policy and exposes the company to liability. You are permanently banned from all Lewis Grove properties. I leaned forward. Here is the reality, I said. I have enough here to send Frank to prison for 3 to 5 years. I have enough to ensure Tracy never works in human resources again. I have enough to sue your family into bankruptcy to recover the stolen funds and the reputational damage. Madison let out a sob. You cannot do that. We are family. We are Ethan's family. You are not family, I said. You are parasites. I looked at Ethan. He was sitting very still, watching Madison. He looked like a man who had walked into a room expecting a birthday party and found a crime scene. However, I continued, I am a pragmatist. A criminal trial is long, it is expensive, and it drags my brother's name through the mud. I do not want the headline to be fiancée of engineer linked to fraud ring. I want to protect the company, and I want to protect Ethan. I pointed to the papers in front of them. Here is the mercy I am offering. You will sign these documents. You will resign immediately. You will admit to the misconduct in a private internal memo to close the file. You will agree to a repayment plan for the $48,000, and in exchange, I will seal the record. No police, no press. You walk away. Frank reached for the pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at his daughter. He just wanted to save himself. He signed. Tracy followed suit, her signature a jagged scrawl of defeat. And Madison? I asked. Madison looked up. Her eyes were red, rimmed with smeared mascara. She looked from her parents, who had just surrendered, to me. I do not work for you, Madison spat. I work for Brightwell. You cannot fire me. I have rights. I own Brightwell, I reminded her. But you are right. You are not accused of fraud like your father. You are accused of creating a hostile work environment and attempting to blackmail the leadership team for a promotion. I softened my voice, offering her one last off-ramp. Madison, if you sign a resignation letter and apologize, truly apologize for the way you treated the staff and for trying to manipulate Ethan's career, I will let you resign with a clean reference. You can go work somewhere else. You can start over. It was a generous offer. It was more than she deserved. But Madison Reed was not built for humility. She was built for conflict. She stood up, knocking her chair back. Apologize, she screeched. To who? To you. To the receptionist. I am not apologizing for having standards. You are the one who should apologize. You set us up. You tricked us. You let us walk in here thinking we were meeting career counselors, just to humiliate us in front of my fiancé. She turned to Ethan, grabbing his arm. Ethan, tell her she is crazy. She is doing this because she is jealous of me. She is trying to ruin our wedding because she knows she will never have what we have. She is a sad, lonely woman with a checkbook, and she is trying to buy power over us. Ethan looked down at her hand on his arm. He didn't pull away this time. He just looked at it, detached, as if observing a foreign object. She is not trying to buy power, Madison, Ethan said quietly. She already has it. She just chose not to use it until you forced her to. You are taking her side. Madison gasped, stepping back as if slapped. I am your wife practically. We are getting married in 3 months. Are we? Ethan asked. The question hung in the air. Ethan stood up. He walked around the table until he was standing face to face with Madison. He looked tired. He looked 10 years older than he had on the rooftop on Saturday, but his eyes were clear. "I have one question for you." "Madison," Ethan said, "and I need you to answer it honestly." For once, Madison wiped her nose, trying to regain some composure. "What? If we were not in this office," Ethan said, "if Isla was not the owner, if she was exactly who you thought she was, a receptionist who lived paycheck to paycheck, who drove an old car and wore a simple dress, if she was a nobody in your eyes," he paused, his voice cracking slightly, "would you still think the things you said to her were okay? Would you still think it was okay to call her a stain on the photo? Would you still think it was okay to treat the staff like dirt?" Madison opened her mouth. She looked at me. She looked at her parents. Her brain was frantically searching for the right answer, the answer that would salvage the situation. But she couldn't find it, because to Madison, the answer was obvious. Yes, it was okay. In her world, if you were poor, you deserved to be treated poorly. If you were in the background, you stayed there. She couldn't lie. Her silence was the loudest sound in the room. She looked away. "Ethan, that is not fair. You are dealing in hypotheticals. The reality is—" "The reality," Ethan interrupted, "is that you only respect people you fear. You only respect people who can give you something." He reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a phone or a document. He pulled out a ring. It was a diamond solitaire, modest but beautiful, the one he had spent 6 months saving for. He looked at the ring for a long moment. I knew what that ring represented to him. It wasn't just jewelry. It was his hope for a family. It was his desire to belong. "I love the idea of us, Madison," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love the family I thought we were building. I thought you were pushing me to be better, but you weren't pushing me. You were positioning me." "Ethan, no," Madison whispered, reaching out. "Baby, please, we can fix this. My dad will pay the money back. We can just move past this." "I cannot move past who you are," Ethan said. He didn't throw the ring. He didn't make a dramatic gesture. He simply leaned forward and placed the ring gently on the mahogany table, right next to the termination papers. The metal made a soft click against the wood. "The engagement is over," Ethan said. Madison stared at the ring. Then she let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She collapsed into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Frank and Tracy stood up, looking defeated and small. They gathered their things, the unsigned contracts, the shreds of their dignity, and moved toward the door. "Come on, Madison," Tracy said, her voice hollow. "Let's go." "I am not leaving," Madison wailed. "He loves me. He loved the version of you that didn't exist," I said from the head of the table. "Nina, please escort them out. Their access badges have already been deactivated." Nina nodded and opened the door. "This way. Security is waiting at the elevator." The Reeds shuffled out. Madison had to be practically carried by her father, still sobbing, still blaming everyone but herself. The door clicked shut, and the sudden silence in the room was profound. It was just me, Ethan, and our parents. Ethan stood by the window, looking out at the city view. His shoulders were slumped. My mother, Linda, stood up slowly. She walked over to me. She looked at the office, the expensive furniture, the name on the wall. Then she looked at me. For the first time in 29 years, she wasn't looking at Isla the difficult one, or Isla the project. She was looking at Isla, the woman who had just dismantled a corruption ring and saved her brother from a disastrous marriage. "Isla," she said, her voice trembling. "We didn't know." "You never asked," I said simply. "I know," she whispered. Tears welled in her eyes. "We were so busy worrying about you, thinking you were struggling, that we never stopped to see if you were actually soaring. We underestimated you, and I am so sorry." My father nodded, looking ashamed. "We thought Ethan was the one who needed our pride. We didn't realize you were the one carrying the weight. I do not need your pride, Dad, I said, standing up. I just needed you to respect me, even when I was wearing the wrinkled dress. I walked over to Ethan. I put a hand on his shoulder. He didn't turn around, but he covered my hand with his. Thank you, he whispered. It hurts like hell. Isla, but thank you. I know, I said, but better a sharp pain now than a lifetime of bleeding. I looked at the ring still sitting on the table. It was a symbol of a bullet dodged. I have to get back to work, I said. Marcus needs to issue a statement to the staff about the leadership changes. You guys take the conference room. Take your time. I walked toward the door. Isla, Ethan called out. I turned back. What now? He asked. What happens to them? They become what they always were, I said. Irrelevant. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The hum of the office greeted me. Phones were ringing. People were typing. The business was moving forward, cleaner and stronger than it had been an hour ago. I didn't smile. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. Revenge is a hot, burning thing, and I felt cool. This wasn't revenge. Revenge is about inflicting pain. This was about restoring balance. I didn't need to destroy them. I just needed to put the truth in its proper place and let gravity do the rest. I walked toward the elevator, my heels clicking on the floor, ready for the next meeting. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served cold. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe relaxing at home? Drop a comment below and let's get a conversation started. If you enjoyed Isla's journey, please make sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so we can get this story out to more people who need a little reminder that sometimes the person in the background is the one running the show. See you in the next story.